The moment my wife's hand connected with my face, the entire world shifted. I didn't see it coming. 1 second, we were sitting at the dinner table, the low hum of conversation and clinking silverware filling the air. The next, my cheek exploded with a sharp, stinging pain as my head snapped to the side. My body followed, tilting dangerously before I lost balance and hit the floor with a dull thud. The impact sent a ringing sensation through my skull, my vision blurring at the edges. For a long second, I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. I lay there, my palms flat against the cool wooden floor, my breath stuck somewhere between my lungs and my throat. The taste of salt and iron lingered on my tongue, whether from the slap or the shock, I wasn't sure. Then, I heard her voice. "How could you?" Claire's voice was sharp, raw with fury. I blinked up at her, confused. My mind raced, flipping through every possible offense I could have committed, but nothing made sense. We had been fine just moments ago. In fact, the dinner had been pleasant, or so I'd thought. My gaze flickered toward Lorraine, her mother, who sat stiffly at the other end of the table. Her lips were pursed, her expression unreadable. A moment ago, she had leaned in to whisper something into Claire's ear, her voice so low I couldn't make out the words. But whatever she had said, it had transformed my wife in an instant. Claire had been smiling. Now, her face was a storm of betrayal and fury. I pushed myself upright, still dazed. "Claire, what are you?" "Don't," she snapped, her voice quivering. Her hands balled into fists at her sides, her entire body trembling. "Just don't." I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't a moment of fleeting anger. This was something deeper. Something that had cracked open a part of her that I wasn't sure I could fix. "What did I do?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Claire, talk to me." Her breathing was uneven. For a brief moment, hesitation flickered in her eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. Instead, she turned away from me, grabbed her purse, and stormed toward the door. Panic flared in my chest. This wasn't normal. We had arguments like any couple, but Claire had never been violent. She had never lashed out like this, had never looked at me with such hatred. I scrambled to my feet. "Claire, wait." She ignored me. She was almost at the door when something strange happened. Her stride faltered. She came to an abrupt stop, her entire body rigid, her back straight as if someone had just whispered her name from the shadows. A thick silence settled over the room. I frowned. "Claire." She didn't answer. Her fingers twitched around the strap of her purse, and when she turned her head slightly, I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. Not anger. Not betrayal. Pure, raw fear. Her shoulders lifted with a slow, shaky inhale. The anger she had worn so openly only moments ago had drained from her expression, replaced by something hollow, something unreadable. A cold weight pressed against my chest. What the hell was going on? I took a slow step toward her. "Claire." She flinched. I froze. My own wife was afraid of me. I had never hurt Claire, not once, not even by accident. And yet, the way she recoiled, the way her breath hitched like she was standing in the presence of a monster, sent a sharp, slicing pain through me that had nothing to do with the slap. Lorraine stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. She moved with eerie calm, her expression composed. "Come, Claire," she said, her voice gentle, almost soothing. "You don't have to stay here." She reached for Claire's arm, and for a second, I thought my wife would follow her without hesitation. But Claire didn't move. She just stood there, still staring at the door, her knuckles turning white around the strap of her purse. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to shake Claire, to force her to tell me what the hell was happening, why she had struck me, why she suddenly looked like she had seen a ghost. But I knew pushing her right now wouldn't help. Instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced my voice to remain steady. "Claire, whatever this is, we can talk about it." She didn't respond. Lorraine's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. It was too tight, too forced. She squeezed Claire's arm gently. "You don't owe him anything, darling. Let's go." Claire finally turned. Her gaze met mine, and for a moment, it felt like she wanted to say something. Something important. But then, she swallowed thickly, her expression closing off. She nodded at her mother. And without another word, she walked out the door. I stood there, rooted in place, my heart hammering in my chest. The cold air from outside seeped into the house as the door swung shut behind them. Silence. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. I ran a hand down my face, wincing as my fingers brushed over the sore spot on my cheek. I still didn't know what I had done, but I knew one thing for sure. That slap had changed everything. I never imagined my marriage would come to this. As I stood alone in the dimly lit dining room, the sting on my cheek long forgotten, my mind drifted back to the beginning. The days when Claire and I were inseparable, when love was simple, untainted by whispers, lies, or betrayal. I met Claire on a rainy afternoon at Rivertown Cafe. I remember that day vividly, as if it were carved into my memory. The cafe had been packed, the scent of freshly ground coffee beans and warm pastries lingering in the air. I had barely managed to squeeze through the crowd when I made the fatal mistake of trying to balance a large cappuccino, my laptop bag, and a book under my arm. The result? Disaster. I tripped on the leg of a chair, sending my coffee flying, and straight onto the table of an unsuspecting woman. Papers went everywhere, brown liquid soaking through neatly written notes. My heart stopped as I looked up, expecting outrage, maybe even curses thrown in my direction. Instead, I found Claire. She blinked at the mess before slowly lifting her gaze to meet mine. A smile tugged at the corners of her lips, and then, to my absolute shock, she laughed. Not just a polite chuckle, but a genuine, melodic laugh that softened the tension in my chest. "I hope you weren't planning on passing those off as your own assignments," she teased, lifting one of the drenched sheets. I was speechless. In that moment, drenched papers and embarrassment faded into the background. All I could see was her. The way her hazel eyes crinkled at the edges, the way she tucked a stray strand of dark hair behind her ear, the way she seemed to glow even under the dim lights of the cafe. From that moment on, I was hooked. We spent hours talking that day. She told me she was a high school English teacher, passionate about literature and poetry. I told her I worked in finance, a job I found dull but necessary. She laughed at my dry sense of humor. I admired her boundless optimism. We were opposites in many ways. Where I was cautious and logical, she was free-spirited and adventurous. But somehow, we fit together seamlessly, like two puzzle pieces destined to meet. Our love story unfolded effortlessly. Dates turned into weekends together, weekends turned into moving in. 1 year later, I got down on one knee in that very same cafe, holding out a ring with shaking hands. Claire had tears in her eyes when she said yes, her voice barely a whisper. Our wedding was small but beautiful. She wore a simple, elegant dress, and as she walked down the aisle, I remember thinking that I had never seen anyone more breathtaking. We exchanged vows under the old oak tree in her grandmother's backyard, promising forever without hesitation. For the first year, everything was perfect. We bought a cozy little home on the outskirts of town, a fixer-upper with a leaky roof and creaky floors. It wasn't much, but it was ours. We spent late nights painting the walls, sneaking kisses in between brush strokes. We talked about the future, kids, family vacations, growing old together. Then, Lorraine moved in. Just for a while, Claire had said. She's struggling after the divorce. At first, I agreed. I understood Claire's desire to help her mother. Lorraine had always been a sharp, opinionated woman, but I never thought she would become a problem. I assumed she'd stay for a few months, get back on her feet, and leave. But she never left. Slowly, things started to change. At first, it was small, subtle comments, passive-aggressive remarks. Lorraine never said anything outright, but I could feel her disapproval in the way she looked at me, the way she sighed whenever I entered the room. "You're lucky Claire settled," she once muttered when she thought I wasn't listening. She could have done so much better. I tried to ignore it, to brush off her remarks as the bitterness of a woman who had lost everything in a nasty divorce. But Claire started changing too. She used to be warm, affectionate. Now, she was guarded, distant. I'd come home from work, excited to tell her about my day, only to find her sitting with Lorraine, whispering. If I asked what they were talking about, Claire would glance at me, her expression unreadable. "Nothing important," she'd say. But I knew that wasn't true. The worst part was that I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment Claire stopped seeing me as her husband and started seeing me as someone else. Someone untrustworthy. Someone she questioned. Lorraine had poisoned her against me, drop by drop, day by day, until the Claire I knew was barely recognizable. I could feel myself losing her, but I didn't know how to stop it. The moment at the dinner table, the slap, the rage in her eyes, was just the final confirmation of something I had feared for months. She wasn't mine anymore. Not entirely. And the worst part? I still didn't know what Lorraine had said to make her snap like that. As I stood in our empty dining room, staring at the overturned chair from where I had fallen, a crushing sense of helplessness settled over me. My wife, the woman I had built a life with, had looked at me as if I were a stranger. I needed to find out why. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. Who could I talk to? Who would believe me? Marcus, my best friend since college. The only person who had seen my relationship with Claire from the beginning, who had stood by my side through thick and thin. He had never liked Lorraine, always warning me to be careful around her. Maybe he had seen something I hadn't. I pressed his name and brought the phone to my ear. It rang twice before he picked up. "Hey man, what's up?" His voice was casual, but I could hear the underlying concern. I never called him this late unless something was wrong. I exhaled slowly. Claire hit me. There was a long pause. Then what? She slapped me. Out of nowhere. We were at dinner, and her mom whispered something to her, and the next thing I know, I'm on the floor. Marcus cursed under his breath. What did she say to her? I don't know, I admitted. But whatever it was bad. Claire looked different, like she was afraid of me. A long silence stretched between us before Marcus finally spoke. You know what I've always said about Lorraine? I swallowed. Yeah. She's playing a long game, Marcus muttered. And she's winning. I clenched my jaw. I couldn't let this be the end of my marriage. I needed answers. I needed the truth. And I had a sinking feeling that whatever Lorraine had told Claire, whatever lie she had planted, was just the beginning of a nightmare I wasn't prepared for. I sat in silence. The sting of Claire's slap, nothing compared to the growing ache in my chest. My hands rested on the table, fingers curled into fists as I stared at the empty space where my wife had been moments ago. My mind raced, replaying the last few minutes over and over, searching for an answer. Any answer that could explain what had just happened. Claire had never hit me before. Not once. Not even in the heat of an argument. And yet, tonight, she had struck me with a force so strong it knocked me to the ground. The Claire I knew, the woman I had fallen in love with, would never have done that. Unless she truly believed I had done something unforgivable. My eyes drifted to Lorraine, who still sat at the table, sipping from her glass of wine with an air of satisfaction. She hadn't moved, hadn't flinched when Claire's hand had connected with my face. It was almost as if she had expected it. No, she had wanted it. Slowly, I forced myself to speak. What did you say to her? Lorraine lifted her gaze, her expression perfectly composed. Excuse me. I leaned forward, my voice low, controlled. You whispered something to Claire, and the next thing I know, she's slapping me like I just confessed to some horrible crime. What did you say? Lorraine sighed, setting her glass down with an exaggerated shake of her head. Honestly, dear, I don't know why you're looking at me like that. I didn't make Claire do anything. If she reacted that way, perhaps you should be asking yourself why. I clenched my jaw. Lorraine was a master manipulator. I had known that since the first time I met her. She didn't attack with outright hostility. No, she preferred something far worse. She planted seeds of doubt, whispered lies in the shadows, twisted words until reality bent to her will. And Claire, my beautiful, strong, intelligent wife, had fallen for it. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Getting angry wouldn't help. I needed to focus. I needed to understand what Lorraine had done, how she had gotten into Claire's head so easily. Then, something caught my eye. A small object lay on the floor near the leg of my chair. At first, I thought it was just my wallet, which must have fallen from my pocket when Claire slapped me. But then, I noticed something beside it. A letter. My heart nearly stopped. It wasn't just any letter. It was that letter. The one I had buried in the back of my desk, hidden away for years. A letter I had never intended for Claire to see. A chill ran down my spine as I reached for it, my fingers trembling slightly. The paper was worn, the edges creased from years of neglect. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. I already knew every word by heart. And now, Claire did too. A sickening realization settled in my gut. Lorraine must have found it. She had given it to Claire. And whatever lies she had spun around it had been enough to make my wife snap. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay calm. I needed to find Claire. I stood abruptly, shoving the letter into my pocket. Lorraine raised a single eyebrow, her lips twitching into something that resembled amusement. Running after her. Are you? She mused. How predictable. I ignored her and strode toward the door. Be careful, dear, she called after me. Claire's not as naive as you think. She sees you now. I froze, my hand gripping the doorknob. She sees me? What the hell did that mean? I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I looked at Lorraine now, I might lose whatever self-control I had left. Instead, I stepped outside, slamming the door behind me. The night air was cold, but I barely felt it. My mind was consumed by one thought: finding Claire. She hadn't taken the car, which meant she was on foot. But where would she go? I knew my wife. When she needed space, she went to one of two places: the park a few blocks away, or the old bookstore downtown, where she used to spend hours browsing for novels she never had time to read. I started with the park. The streets were quiet, the faint glow of streetlights casting long shadows along the pavement. My footsteps echoed in the silence as I approached the park entrance, my breath coming in short bursts. Then I saw her. Claire stood near the fountain, her back to me, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold herself together. Her posture was tense, her head slightly bowed. I swallowed hard, forcing down the knot in my throat. Claire, I said softly. She stiffened but didn't turn around. I took a careful step closer. Claire, please. Just talk to me. She let out a shaky breath. Why do you have that letter? Her voice was raw, barely above a whisper. I hesitated, then pulled it from my pocket. Because I never threw it away. Slowly, she turned. Her eyes were red, her expression torn between anger and something else, something far worse. Betrayal. Her gaze dropped to the letter in my hands. You lied to me. I shook my head. No, Claire. I didn't. Then explain, she demanded, her voice trembling. Because my mother told me everything, and I don't know what to believe anymore. I clenched my jaw. Lorraine had done what she did best. She had twisted the truth, wrapped it up in enough venom to make Claire doubt everything she thought she knew. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Claire, whatever your mother told you, I need you to hear it from me. Please. She didn't move, but she didn't walk away either. So I took a breath and prepared to tell her the truth. The truth about the letter, the truth about my past, and the truth about the one person I had spent my entire life trying to forget. Claire wasn't just angry, she was afraid. That was the part that gutted me the most. I had seen Claire upset before, frustrated, even distant during our worst arguments. But fear? That was new. And it wasn't the kind of fear that came from uncertainty or misunderstanding. No, this was something deeper, something that had wrapped itself around her so tightly that she was trembling. And all because of that letter. She held it in her hands now, gripping the paper so tightly that it crinkled under her fingers. She hadn't spoken since I told her I would explain everything. Instead, she just stood there, her breathing uneven, her gaze flickering between me and the worn envelope as if waiting for me to admit to some unspeakable crime. I took a careful step forward. Claire, don't. Her voice was sharp, but it wavered at the edges. She shook her head, taking a step back. I need space. I can't be near you right now. The words hit harder than I expected. Space. It was such a simple word, yet in that moment, it felt like the final crack in an already fragile glass, ready to shatter completely. I swallowed hard. Claire, please. Just let me explain. But she wasn't listening. She clutched the letter to her chest, as if it were some kind of shield, protecting her from the person she suddenly believed I had become. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her pace quickening with each step. I wanted to follow her. I wanted to grab her hand, make her look at me, force her to see that whatever Lorraine had told her was a lie. But something in me knew that if I pushed right now, I'd lose her completely. So I let her go. I watched as she disappeared down the sidewalk, the wind tugging at her hair, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to keep from falling apart. Then, after a long moment, I turned and walked in the opposite direction. I needed help. I needed someone who would listen, someone who would believe me. There was only one person I could think of. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Marcus. My best friend since college. The one person who had never trusted Lorraine from the start. I hit the call button and brought the phone to my ear. It rang once, twice. Then, yo, what's up, man? Marcus's voice was casual, but I could hear the underlying concern. I never called him this late unless something was wrong. I exhaled sharply. I need to talk. There was a pause. That bad. Worse. Another pause. Then, come over. Marcus lived about 10 minutes away, and I barely registered the drive. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my thoughts racing in 100 different directions. By the time I pulled into his driveway, my pulse was pounding in my ears. The porch light flicked on as I stepped out of the car, and a second later, the front door swung open. Marcus stood in the doorway, wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants, his expression serious. "All right," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Tell me everything." I didn't even wait for him to close the door before I started talking. "She hit me," I said, my voice hollow. "Claire." She slapped me out of nowhere. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, what?" I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the length of his living room. We were at dinner. Everything was fine, and then Lorraine leaned in, whispered something to her, and the next thing I know, she's looking at me like I'm the worst person in the world. And then, I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. She just lost it. Marcus let out a low whistle. "What did Lorraine say?" I stopped pacing. "I don't know." Marcus folded his arms. "Okay, but Claire has never been the type to just react like that. What triggered her?" I hesitated, then pulled the crumpled letter from my pocket and held it out. Marcus took it, frowning as he unfolded the paper. His eyes scanned the words, his expression shifting from confusion to realization. "Damn," he muttered. "This is from..." "Yeah," I cut in. "Him." Marcus exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "And Claire saw this." "She didn't just see it," I said. "Lorraine gave it to her. She must have found it in the house and spun it into something worse. And now Claire thinks I've been hiding some huge secret from her." Marcus's expression darkened. "She's playing dirty." I let out a humorless laugh. "When has Lorraine ever played fair?" He shook his head. "Man, I hate to say it, but this woman has been trying to break your marriage from day one. You remember what I told you when she moved in?" I nodded. "You told me it was a mistake. And I was right." He sighed. "So what now?" I ran a hand over my face, exhaustion pressing down on me. "Claire said she needs space. But I don't know if space is going to fix this. If Lorraine is feeding her lies, the longer I stay away, the more time she has to twist things even further." Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then, he said, "Maybe it's time you stop playing defense." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "You've been reacting to everything Lorraine throws at you. But maybe it's time you do something instead. Find out what she told Claire. Get ahead of it. If you sit back and wait, you'll lose her." I swallowed hard. "And if I've already lost her?" Marcus shook his head. "You haven't. Not yet. But you need to move fast." I nodded slowly, my mind racing with possibilities. Claire thought I was hiding something. Lorraine had planted a lie. And if I didn't fight back, I was going to lose the one person I couldn't live without. It was time to take control of my own damn story. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I left Marcus's place. Even after his words echoed in my head. Asterisk, you need to move fast. Asterisk, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind running in endless circles. Claire hadn't come home. I had checked my phone at least 100 times, hoping to see a message, a missed call, anything. But there was nothing. The silence was unbearable. By the time the first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds, I felt like a man on the verge of unraveling. My body ached from exhaustion, but my mind refused to shut down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's face, the way she looked at me when she saw the letter. Like she didn't know me anymore. I had to fix this. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. Claire. I hesitated for only a second before pressing the call button. It rang once, twice. Then, her voice. "We need to talk," she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. My throat felt tight. "Claire." "Tomorrow," she cut in. "No excuses." And then she hung up. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the call had ended. Tomorrow. I had less than 24 hours to figure out how to keep my marriage from crumbling. I met Claire at Rivertown Cafe the next afternoon. It was the same place where we had first met. The same place where I had spilled coffee on her papers, where she had laughed instead of getting angry, where we had spent hours talking like we had known each other for years instead of minutes. Back then, the cafe had felt warm, inviting. A place filled with possibilities. Now, it felt like a battleground. Claire was already there when I arrived, sitting at the table by the window, the one we always used to claim as ours. Her hands were folded on the table, her expression unreadable. I swallowed hard and walked over, my heart pounding. She didn't look up as I sat down. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, she reached into her purse and pulled out the letter. She placed it on the table between us like it was evidence in a trial. "Explain," she said. I stared at it, my chest tightening. I knew this moment was coming. I had spent all night preparing for it, running through every possible way to tell her the truth without making it worse. But now that I was here, words felt impossible. I cleared my throat. "It's from my father." Claire's face paled. "You told me your father abandoned you," she whispered. "That he left you and your mom when you were a kid." I nodded. "He did. Then why is he writing to you now?" I exhaled slowly. "Because he wants something from me." And I never responded. Claire's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "My mom said you were hiding something. That you've been lying to me from the start." Anger flickered inside me. Not at Claire, but at Lorraine. I leaned forward, my voice low. "Your mother has been trying to turn you against me since the day she moved in." Claire flinched. "She's my mother. And I'm your husband," I said, my voice raw. "Or does that not matter anymore?" Her breath hitched, and for the first time since she walked out last night, I saw something crack in her expression. Doubt. Uncertainty. She looked away, staring out the window, her fingers playing with the edge of her sleeve. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because he doesn't matter," I said. "Because I spent my entire life trying to forget he even exists." She was silent for a long time. Then, finally, she met my gaze. "What did he want?" I hesitated, then reached for the letter, unfolding it carefully. I had read it 100 times before, but now, as I looked at the words again, they felt heavier. "Son, I know it's been years, and I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need your help. I don't expect you to forgive me, but please, just hear me out. I don't have much time left." There was more, but I couldn't bring myself to read it aloud. I looked at Claire. I never answered him. I never even thought about answering him. Because to me, he stopped existing the day he walked out on my mom and me. Claire's eyes searched mine. "And you never planned to tell me?" I didn't see the point. I shook my head. I didn't want him in my life. I didn't want him in our life. She swallowed. "But my mom." I let out a bitter laugh. "Your mom found this letter and saw an opportunity. She twisted it into something ugly, something that made you doubt me." Claire looked away again, her jaw tightening. I could see the war raging inside her. She wanted to believe me. But Lorraine had spent months, maybe even years, whispering in her ear, planting seeds of doubt. And now, those seeds had grown into something that might be impossible to uproot. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. My chest tightened. "Claire, please. You know me. You know who I am." She exhaled shakily. I thought I did. The words sliced through me like a knife. I wanted to argue, to tell her that I was still the same man she had married, the same man who had loved her through every high and low. But I also knew that words wouldn't be enough. Not this time. Claire stood abruptly, shoving the letter back into her purse. "I need to think," she said. My heart pounded. "Claire, She swallowed. "I just need time." I watched her walk away, my hands clenched into fists under the table. This wasn't over. But for the first time, I wondered if I was already too late. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's face, the raw pain, the doubt, the way she had pulled her hand away from mine like I was a stranger. I had thought telling her the truth would be enough. That once she knew the letter was nothing more than a desperate attempt from a man I had long since erased from my life, she would believe me. But it wasn't that simple. Because Lorraine had done more than plan a lie. She had planted fear. And once fear took root, it was nearly impossible to kill. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. Claire still hadn't come home. I tried calling. No answer. I sent a text. No response. By noon, my patience had run dry. I wasn't going to sit here and let Lorraine poison my wife any more than she already had. I needed to see Claire. I needed to fix this before it was too late. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went to her. The cafe felt different this time. The last time we met here, Claire had looked at me like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump or turn back. Now, as I walked in and spotted her sitting at a table near the back, I could tell she had already made a decision. The problem was, I didn't know what that decision was yet. She didn't look up as I approached. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, my heart pounding. She was staring at the cup in front of her, running her fingertip around the rim. Her expression was distant, like she was somewhere far away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, she reached into her purse and pulled out the letter. Again, she placed it on the table between us, just like before. "Tell me everything," she said softly. My throat tightened. "Claire, I already." "Everything," she repeated, finally looking at me. "No more half-truths. No more protecting me. I want the whole story." I exhaled slowly, running a hand down my face. I didn't want to do this. Not because I had anything to hide, but because I knew the truth wasn't just ugly. It was something that could never be undone once it was spoken aloud. But Claire deserved to hear it. So I told her. I told her about my father. How he had walked out on my mother and me when I was only 7 years old, leaving us with nothing but a few unpaid bills and a hollow promise that he'd come back when things got better. He never did. I told her about the years that followed. How my mother had worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. How I had spent most of my childhood watching her struggle just to put food on the table. How I had learned, at far too young an age, that love wasn't always permanent. And then I told her about the letter. How, after 20 years of silence, he had suddenly reached out, claiming to be dying, asking me to meet him before it was too late. I never responded. I said, my voice rough. Because I didn't care. Because I spent my whole damn life trying to forget he existed. Claire was silent. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the letter again, staring at the words as if they might rearrange themselves into something different. Something that made more sense. "My mom said you were hiding this because you didn't want me to know the truth," she murmured. I let out a bitter laugh. "No, your mom found it and saw an opportunity." She swallowed hard. She said you were hiding something else." I stiffened. "What?" she said. Claire hesitated, then took a deep breath. "She said your father's death wasn't the only thing you were keeping from me, that there was something more." Anger flared in my chest. Of course Lorraine had said that. Of course she had taken one piece of the truth and twisted it into something so much worse. I leaned forward, my jaw tight. "And you believed her?" Claire flinched. "I didn't want to," she whispered. "But the way you've been acting, the way you never told me about this letter, I didn't know what to think." I ran a hand through my hair, frustration boiling over. "Claire, for months, your mother has been waiting for a chance to turn you against me, and you gave it to her." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "She's my mother," she said weakly. "And I'm your husband," I shot back. "Or does that not mean anything anymore?" Silence. For a moment, I thought she might finally see it. Finally understand that Lorraine had been manipulating her from the start. But then, she shook her head. I need time." My heart sank. Time. It was the one thing I didn't have. I could feel it slipping away, feel the weight of something irreversible settling between us. Claire reached for her purse. "I have to go." Panic flared in my chest. "Claire." She stood, clutching the strap of her bag like it was a lifeline. "I just need to think," she said. "Please." And then, just like before, she walked away. I sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, the ghost of our love hanging heavy in the air. I had told her everything. I had given her the truth. But maybe it was too late. Maybe Lorraine had already won. And maybe, just maybe, there was nothing left to save. The house felt different when I got home. Claire's absence wasn't just noticeable, it was suffocating. Every room felt colder, emptier. The silence pressed against my ears, making the air feel heavier, thicker. For months, I had sensed her slipping away, but now it felt real, tangible, like a door had closed, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever get back inside. I dropped my keys on the counter and exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. My conversation with Claire played over and over in my head, every word dissected, every pause analyzed. She had asked for time, but time wasn't on my side, because while she was thinking, Lorraine was scheming. I needed to do something. Before she made sure Claire never came home again. I was still pacing the living room when my phone rang. "Marcus." I picked up instantly. "Tell me you have something." His voice was tense. "You're not gonna like this." I clenched my jaw. "What?" "She's at your house." My blood ran cold. "Who?" "Lorraine," Marcus said. "I was driving past your place on my way home, and I saw her standing outside, talking to your neighbor. She's saying some really messed up stuff, man." I grabbed my jacket and was out the door before he even finished his sentence. "What is she saying?" I demanded, already getting into my car. Marcus hesitated. She's telling people you're abusive. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel. Are you kidding me? Wish I was. He sighed. She's making it sound like Claire left you because she was scared. And dude, your neighbor? She's eating it up, nodding along, looking concerned. I felt rage rise in my throat like bile. Lorraine wasn't just trying to ruin my marriage. She was trying to ruin me. I needed to act fast. I needed Claire to hear my side before Lorraine burned everything to the ground. I took a deep breath and called her. She picked up on the second ring. Claire, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You need to come home. Now. She hesitated. Why? Because your mother is outside telling people I abused you. Silence. Then, in a voice so quiet I barely heard it, she whispered, she wouldn't. She is. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. And if you don't come here and set the record straight, she's going to make sure you never come back. A long pause. Then, I'm on my way. By the time I pulled into the driveway, Lorraine was still there. She stood on the front porch, talking in hushed tones to Mrs. Hendricks, our elderly neighbor who had lived next door for years. Mrs. Hendricks, who had always smiled at me, who had brought us cookies when we first moved in, who now looked at me like I was some kind of monster. My hands trembled with barely restrained fury as I stepped out of the car. Lorraine spotted me immediately. Her lips curled into a sickeningly sweet smile. Ah, there he is, she said, her voice laced with artificial concern. I was just telling Mrs. Hendricks about how worried I am for Claire. I clenched my jaw. Enough. She tilted her head. Excuse me. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. I don't know what your endgame is, but you need to stop. Lorraine's smile never wavered. Oh dear, she sighed. I'm just telling people the truth. My hands balled into fists. Before I could respond, a car pulled up. Claire. She stepped out hesitantly, her eyes darting between me and her mother. Her expression was unreadable, but there was tension in her shoulders, like she had been dreading this moment as much as I had. Lorraine turned to her, putting on her best, concerned mother face. Sweetheart, she cooed. I was just telling the neighbors how brave you are for leaving. Claire stiffened. Mom, you don't have to go back in there, darling, Lorraine said, reaching for her hand. You don't have to pretend anymore. Everyone understands. My stomach twisted. She was trying to push Claire over the edge, to make her choose. Claire pulled her hand away. Mom, stop. Lorraine blinked. Claire. No, she snapped. Enough. For the first time, Lorraine's mask cracked. Claire took a deep breath and turned to Mrs. Hendricks, who was still watching with wide eyes. I don't know what my mother told you, she said carefully. But it's not true. My husband is not abusive. A flicker of relief shot through me, but I kept my face neutral. Mrs. Hendricks frowned. But, dear, your mother said. My mother lies, Claire said, her voice firm. She twists things. And I let her. Lorraine took a step back, her face pale. Claire turned to me. I don't know if I can fix this, she admitted. I don't know if I can go back to how things were. I swallowed hard. Claire. But I do know that I need to figure it out on my own. Without my mother in my ear. Lorraine inhaled sharply. Claire, you don't have to. I do, Claire said. She turned to her mother, her expression colder than I had ever seen it. You need to leave. Lorraine recoiled. Sweetheart. Now. For the first time, Lorraine looked unsure. She glanced at me, then back at Claire, her lips pressing into a thin line. Then, slowly, she straightened her shoulders and nodded. If that's what you want, she murmured. Claire didn't respond. Lorraine turned and walked away, her posture stiff, her heels clicking against the pavement. The moment she was gone, Claire let out a shaky breath. I wanted to reach for her, to hold her, to tell her we were going to be okay. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I didn't know if we were. Claire looked up at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I just need time, she whispered. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Okay. She turned and walked toward the house, stepping inside without another word. And as I stood there, watching her disappear behind the door, I realized that even though Lorraine was gone, the damage she had done wasn't. Not yet. And maybe, not ever. The house was quiet when I stepped inside, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that brought peace. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a battlefield after the war, where the damage was done, and all that remained was the wreckage. Claire was in the living room, standing near the fireplace with her arms wrapped around herself. She didn't turn when I walked in. I hesitated, then cleared my throat. Claire, did she really say all that? Her voice was soft, but there was something sharp beneath it. I exhaled. Yeah, she did. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. God, I should have seen it coming. I took a cautious step forward. Claire, your mom. I know, she cut in. I know what she is. What she does. She trailed off, her fingers tightening around her sleeves. I waited. After a long pause, she finally turned to face me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her expression exhausted. I don't know how to undo this. I swallowed hard. Undo what? Her voice cracked. Everything. I stepped closer, slowly, carefully, like I was approaching a wounded animal. We don't have to undo anything, Claire. We just have to move forward. She let out a shaky breath. I don't know how to do that. Neither did I. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Lorraine win. I sat down on the couch and gestured for her to do the same. She hesitated before finally sinking down beside me, keeping a few inches of space between us. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then, softly, I said, "When did it start?" Claire frowned. What? When did she start turning you against me? She flinched. I wasn't. She stopped herself, biting her lip. It wasn't all at once. It was little things. Comments. Warnings. Like what? She hesitated, then looked down at her hands. She'd say you were keeping secrets. That you weren't telling me everything. That one day, I'd wake up and realize I didn't really know you. My jaw tightened. And you believed her? Claire squeezed her eyes shut. I didn't want to, but she made me doubt you. And once that doubt was there, I couldn't stop seeing things through her lens. I exhaled slowly. That's what she does, Claire. She plants the seed, and then she lets you water it. She looked away. I let her. I reached for her hand, hesitating before my fingers brushed against hers. You don't have to let her anymore. She swallowed hard, but didn't pull away. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. I squeezed her hand gently. We do it together. She let out a shuddering breath, then nodded. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a piece of her back. That night, we slept in the same bed, but there was still distance between us. She faced away from me, curled up on her side, and I didn't try to close the gap. I knew she needed time, and for now, I was willing to wait. But just as I was drifting off, she spoke. She's been texting me, she whispered. My eyes snapped open. I turned my head to look at her. Your mom. Claire nodded. I blocked her, but she keeps using different numbers. Anger simmered in my chest. What is she saying? Claire hesitated. Then, carefully, she reached for her phone on the nightstand, unlocking it before handing it to me. I stared at the screen. There were dozens of messages. You're making a mistake. You think he's the good guy, but you'll see. He's turning you against me. That's what men like him do. You'll regret this. My grip tightened around the phone. She's trying to scare you. I muttered. Claire rolled onto her back, staring up at the ceiling. It's working. I placed the phone down and turned to her. Claire, listen to me. She doesn't control you. Not anymore. Her breath hitched. But what if she's right? I stiffened. About what? She closed her eyes. What if I do regret this? For a second, I didn't speak. Then, carefully, I said, do you regret us? She swallowed hard. I don't know. The words stung more than I expected. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling beside her. After a long moment, I said, I love you, Claire. She didn't say it back, but she didn't pull away either. The next morning, I woke up to find Claire already in the kitchen, making coffee. She looked lighter. Not completely healed, not completely sure of anything, but there was a shift. A crack in the wall Lorraine had built between us. I walked up behind her, hesitating for only a second before placing a hand on the small of her back. She stiffened slightly, but didn't move away. Morning, I murmured. She nodded. Morning. I exhaled, rubbing my thumb against her spine. We're going to be okay, Claire. She let out a shaky breath. I hope so. It wasn't an answer, but it was something. And for now, something was enough. I never realized how much damage Lorraine had done until Claire and I started trying to rebuild what was left of us. Trust wasn't something you could snap your fingers and regain overnight. It wasn't like flipping a switch and suddenly being back to how things were before. No, trust was delicate, like a cracked mirror. Once it shattered, you could try to piece it back together, but the lines would always remain. The morning after Claire showed me the messages from her mother, things felt different. Not better, not worse, just different. She wasn't avoiding me anymore. She let me stand close to her when she made coffee. She didn't flinch when I reached for her hand at the dinner table. These were small things. Barely noticeable, really, but after everything, they felt like milestones. Still, there was a distance between us. She spoke carefully, like she was measuring every word. She still hesitated before looking me in the eye. And at night, though we slept in the same bed, there was an invisible line neither of us crossed. We weren't okay, but at least we weren't lost. One evening, a few days later, Claire finally brought up the thing we had been avoiding. I want to go to therapy. I looked up from my laptop, caught off guard. What? She sat across from me on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her. Us, she clarified. I want us to go to therapy. I set my laptop aside and studied her. Do you think we need it? She let out a soft, humorless laugh. I don't think we don't need it. She had a point. I sighed, rubbing my hands together. Okay, I said. If that's what you want, I'm in. Relief flickered across her face. Really? Yeah, I nodded. I'll do whatever it takes, Claire. She swallowed, looking down at her lap. Good. It wasn't an I love you. It wasn't a promise. But it was a start. Our first session was awkward. The therapist, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Rivera, sat across from us, watching with careful eyes as Claire and I struggled to figure out how to say what needed to be said. Claire went first. I feel like I don't know how to trust my own thoughts anymore, she admitted, voice quiet. For so long, I let my mother tell me how to think, how to feel. And now, I don't know what's real and what's just her voice in my head. That hurt to hear. Not because she meant to hurt me, but because it made me realize just how deep Lorraine's influence had gone. Dr. Rivera nodded. That's understandable. Manipulation, especially from a parent, can be incredibly difficult to untangle. Claire sighed, rubbing her temples. I just want to stop second-guessing everything. Dr. Rivera turned to me. And you? How do you feel? I exhaled. Angry. Claire's head snapped up. Not at you. I clarified quickly. At Lorraine. At what she did to us. I swallowed hard. I spent so long thinking love was enough. That if Claire knew I loved her, nothing else would matter. But I was wrong. Claire's face softened, and for the first time in weeks, she reached for my hand. I held onto it like it was the only thing keeping me steady. Dr. Rivera nodded. Love is important, but trust is the foundation of a marriage. And right now, that foundation is cracked. We both nodded. Then, Dr. Rivera leaned forward. Tell me something, she said. What does healing look like for both of you? Claire was quiet for a moment. Then, she said, healing looks like feeling safe again. I squeezed her hand. Healing looks like not being afraid of losing each other. Dr. Rivera smiled softly. Then let's work toward that. The sessions continued, week after week. Some days were harder than others. Some days Claire was more open, and other days, she pulled back, her walls still partially up. But little by little, we started finding our way back to each other. I noticed the changes in small ways. She started texting me randomly throughout the day again. Things like I saw the funniest thing at work today, or what do you want for dinner? They weren't love notes or grand gestures, but they were signs that she was letting me back into her daily life. One night, as we were brushing our teeth, I caught her staring at me through the mirror. When I raised an eyebrow, she blushed and looked away. I set my toothbrush down and turned to face her. What? She hesitated, then said, I missed you. My chest ached. I reached for her, cupping her face in my hands. I never left. She leaned into my touch, closing her eyes for a moment. And when she opened them, for the first time in a long time, I saw something that had been missing. Hope. One night, weeks later, I woke up to the sound of Claire shifting beside me. I blinked, adjusting to the darkness. You okay? I murmured. She hesitated, then whispered, Can I come closer? My breath caught. I reached out, lifting the blanket slightly. Always. She curled up against me, resting her head on my chest, her fingers gripping my shirt. I'm sorry, she whispered into the darkness. I kissed the top of her head. We're both sorry. She exhaled shakily. I love you. The words settled deep in my chest, soothing wounds I hadn't even realized were still open. I held her tighter. I love you too. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we were going to be okay. Months passed, and piece by piece, we built something new. Not the marriage we had before. That version of us was gone. It had been tainted by doubt, poisoned by whispers, shattered by manipulation. But what we had now, it was stronger. It was real. And most importantly, it was ours. Claire and I continued therapy, even when things started feeling normal again. We learned how to communicate better, how to untangle truth from lies, how to recognize when we were falling into old habits. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but we were trying, and trying was enough. Then, one morning, everything changed. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when I heard Claire call my name from the bathroom. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. I put down my mug and walked toward the sound, my heart thudding. Claire. She was standing in front of the mirror, gripping the edge of the sink with both hands. Her breathing was uneven. I immediately went to her side. "What's wrong?" She turned to me, eyes wide, lips parted slightly, like she was struggling to find the words. Then, slowly, she lifted something into view. A small plastic stick. At first, I didn't understand. Then, I saw the result. 2 lines. My mouth went dry. "Is that?" She nodded quickly. I blinked. Then, without thinking, I grabbed the test from her hands and stared at it like I could somehow change the result if I just looked hard enough. A baby. We were having a baby. Claire let out a shaky laugh. "Say something." I opened my mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "You're pregnant?" She nodded again. I looked down at the test, then back at her. And then I started laughing. Claire's eyes widened. "Why are you laughing?" I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. "Because I'm happy," I said against her hair. "Claire, this is—" I pulled back, cupping her face in my hands. "This is amazing." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I was so scared to tell you." "Why?" I frowned. She swallowed hard. "Because we've been through so much. And I didn't know if this was something you even wanted after everything." I kissed her forehead, then her nose, then finally her lips. "Claire," I whispered, "this is everything I've ever wanted." She let out a soft sob, burying her face in my chest. I held her as tightly as I could, breathing her in, feeling the warmth of her against me. This was real. This was ours. And nothing was going to take it away. A few weeks later, we sat in the hospital, waiting for the first ultrasound. Claire's hand was in mine, her fingers intertwined with mine, her grip tight. I could feel the nervous energy radiating from her. I squeezed her hand. "You okay?" She let out a shaky breath. I don't know what to expect." I kissed her temple. "Whatever happens, we're in this together." She turned to me, a small smile breaking through her anxiety. The doctor walked in, cheerful and bright, and within minutes, the monitor flickered to life. Then, suddenly, there it was. A tiny heartbeat. Strong. Steady. Claire let out a choked gasp, covering her mouth with her free hand. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. "That's our baby," I whispered. Claire nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, staring at the little flicker on the screen, the proof that something beautiful had come from all the pain. Something worth fighting for. Months passed, and as Claire's belly grew, so did our excitement. We decorated the nursery together, picking out soft blues and grays, arguing over the best crib, laughing as we tried to assemble the tiny furniture. One evening, as Claire sat on the nursery floor folding baby clothes, she looked up at me with an unreadable expression. "Do you think I'll be a good mom?" I frowned, sitting beside her. "What?" She chewed on her lip. "I mean, my mother wasn't exactly the best example." I exhaled, taking her hands in mine. "Claire, listen to me. You are nothing like Lorraine." She hesitated. "But what if I mess up?" I smiled softly. "You will." She let out a surprised laugh. "Wow, thanks." I chuckled. "Claire, we're both going to mess up. We're going to have sleepless nights. We're going to forget things. We're going to struggle. But none of that will change the fact that you're already the best mother our baby could ever have." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Then, she placed my hand on her belly. And for the first time, I felt our baby kick. I sucked in a breath. "Whoa." Claire grinned. "See? He agrees with you." I raised an eyebrow. "He." She shrugged. "I just have a feeling." I laughed. "Guess we'll find out soon enough." Then, finally, the day came. Claire was in labor for 14 hours, and I was by her side for every single one of them. She gripped my hand so tightly I was sure I'd never be able to use it again, but I didn't care. All that mattered was getting her through it. And then, at exactly 3:47 a.m., the most beautiful sound in the world filled the room. Our baby's first cry. A boy. I stared at him, completely in awe, as the nurse placed him in Claire's arms. She was crying. I was crying. And when she looked up at me, Smiling through her exhaustion, I knew. We had made it. We had survived the storm. And now, we were finally home. A few days later, we were settled at home, the three of us. Claire sat on the couch, holding our son close to her chest, rocking him gently. I watched from the doorway, my heart so full I thought it might burst. Then, the doorbell rang. I frowned. Claire looked up. Who was that? I had no idea. I walked to the door, opened it, and froze. Sitting on the welcome mat was a small, silver box. I hesitated, then picked it up, turning it over in my hands. No name, no note, just a simple, white envelope tucked beneath the ribbon. I opened it, my stomach twisting. Inside was a single message, typed neatly on thick cardstock. Blood is thicker than water. I swallowed hard. Lorraine. I turned back to look at Claire, who was watching me from the couch, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. She reached for my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. Then, without a word, she took the card from me, crumpled it in her fist, and threw it away. I exhaled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. She was right. Lorraine had no power here anymore. Not over us. Not ever again. And as I looked down at my son, sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms, I knew. We had won. The night of the company party was supposed to be a pleasant escape, a chance to enjoy good food and conversation in a polished, professional setting. The venue was impressive. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and a live jazz band playing softly in the background. But none of it registered as I stood near the bar, watching Clara. She was in the middle of the room, her laughter ringing out above the low murmur of conversation. Her hand rested lightly on Leonard's arm, and the two of them were standing far too close for comfort. The way she leaned in, flipping her hair and flashing her brightest smile, sent a hot surge of anger through me. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was innocent. But the way Leonard avoided my gaze and Clara completely ignored my presence made it impossible to shake the feeling that something was off. I made my way over to them, weaving through clusters of colleagues. Leonard noticed me first, his smile faltering slightly before he masked it with his usual charm. Clara, on the other hand, didn't even look up. Ethan. Leonard greeted me with a handshake that felt just a little too firm. Great to see you. How are you enjoying the party? It's fine, I said, keeping my tone neutral as I glanced at Clara. She still hadn't acknowledged me. Instead, she laughed at something Leonard had said earlier, as though I were invisible. I waited for her to say something, to at least acknowledge that I was standing right there, but she didn't. Her body language was uncomfortably familiar, angled toward Leonard, her hand still on his arm, her smile wide and inviting. Clara, I said finally, my voice low but firm, can I have a word? She turned to me, her expression a mix of annoyance and feigned innocence. What is it, Ethan? Can't you see I'm in the middle of a conversation? My jaw tightened, but I kept my composure. Yeah, I can see that, I said, my voice steady. I can also see the way you're flirting with him right in front of me. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Leonard shifted uncomfortably beside her, looking like he wished he were anywhere else. Flirting? Clara repeated, her tone dripping with mock incredulity. Ethan, don't be ridiculous. We're just talking. Talking? I echoed, my voice rising just enough to catch the attention of a few nearby guests. Is that what you call this? Clara's expression hardened. If you can't handle a harmless conversation, maybe you should leave. Her words hit me like a slap. The room seemed to go quiet, the hum of chatter fading as I processed what she just said. I glanced around, noting the curious stares of some of the other partygoers. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their whispered speculations about the cracks in our marriage. But instead of snapping, instead of causing a scene, I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that held the promise of something Clara wouldn't see coming. Consider it done, sweetheart, I said, my voice calm but cold. It's your farewell performance. Her eyes widened, just for a moment, before she masked it with an eye roll and turned back to Leonard. Honestly, Ethan, you're so dramatic. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned and walked away, leaving her and Leonard to bask in their delusion that they'd won some unspoken battle. As I made my way toward the exit, I noticed the whispers spreading among the guests. Colleagues exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from shock to pity. I didn't care. Let them talk. Let them wonder. By the time I stepped outside into the cool night air, the anger I'd been holding back had solidified into resolve. Clara had made her choice, and I was done being the fool who stood by and watched her disrespect me. The party might have been her stage, but I was about to rewrite the script, and by the time I was finished, she'd regret every smug word that had fallen from her lips. I left the party with a simmering calmness, the kind of quiet that only comes before a storm. The distant sound of jazz and laughter faded as I walked out the front doors and into the cool night air. Every step I took toward my car felt heavier, but with each passing second, I knew exactly what I had to do. This wasn't going to be another argument that ended with apologies and promises. No, this time, I was done. Driving home was a blur. My mind raced as I pieced together my next moves. The scene at the party played on a loop in my head. Clara's dismissive tone, her smug smile, the way she leaned into Leonard like I wasn't even there. It wasn't just the flirting. It was the blatant disrespect. She had tested my patience for years, but this was the final straw. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the house we had shared for so long. The lights were off, and the silence was deafening. This house was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where trust and love lived. Instead, it had become a stage for betrayal. I stepped out of the car, my jaw set as I unlocked the front door. Once inside, I moved with purpose. First, I grabbed the spare keys from the drawer in the kitchen and placed them on the counter. Then, I pulled out my phone and called the locksmith. "Emergency service," I said firmly. "I need the locks changed tonight." The man on the other end hesitated. "Sir, it's pretty late." "I'll pay extra," I interrupted. "Just get here as soon as you can." By the time the locksmith arrived, I had already called my financial manager and given him clear instructions. Freeze the joint accounts, transfer all funds into my private account, and revoke Clara's access to every financial resource tied to my name. "She won't be able to touch a dime," he assured me. "Good," I said. The locksmith worked quickly, replacing the locks on both the front and back doors. When he handed me the new set of keys, I felt an odd sense of relief. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my life. "Thanks," I said as I escorted him out. With the new keys in hand, I locked the door and sat on the couch, waiting. I knew Clara wouldn't be far behind. She'd stay at the party long enough to enjoy herself, likely oblivious to the storm brewing back home, but she'd come, and I'd be ready. It was nearly midnight when I heard the first knock. "Ethan," Clara's voice called out from the other side of the door, sharp and demanding. "Open the door." I didn't move at first. I sat there, staring at the door, letting her voice fill the silence. "Ethan, I know you're in there," she yelled, her tone growing more frustrated. The knocking turned into pounding, and the anger in her voice was unmistakable. I stood slowly, walking to the door and pausing just long enough to make her squirm. When I finally opened it, I only cracked it enough to see her face. Clara looked disheveled, her makeup slightly smudged, her expression a mix of confusion and annoyance. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Why can't I get in?" I leaned against the doorframe, my expression calm. "Because you don't live here anymore." Her jaw dropped. "What the hell are you talking about? This is my house too, Ethan." "Not anymore," I said evenly. "The locks are changed. Your access to our accounts is gone. And as far as I'm concerned, so are you." She stared at me, her face twisting in disbelief. "You're being ridiculous. Let me in." I stepped back, my grip on the door tightening. "Why don't you go sleep at your boss's house? You seem comfortable enough with him." The words hit her like a slap. For a moment, she was silent, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't find the words to respond. "Ethan, this is insane," she finally shouted. "We need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice cold. "You made your choice, Clara. Now you get to live with it." I shut the door in her face, locking it behind me as she started pounding on it again. Her voice was muffled now, pleading and cursing in equal measure. The commotion didn't go unnoticed. The next morning, I caught Linda, our nosiest neighbor, peeking out from behind her curtains as I stepped onto the porch. She wasn't subtle, her curiosity practically radiating from her window. By lunchtime, the phone call started. Friends and neighbors were just checking in, their voices dripping with curiosity. "Is everything okay, Ethan? We heard some noise last night." I gave them as little information as possible. "Just a disagreement," I said. "Nothing to worry about." But I knew better. In a neighborhood like ours, gossip spread like wildfire. Clara had humiliated me at the party, and now the tables were turning. Let them talk. Let them wonder. For once, I didn't care. As I sat on the porch, sipping my coffee and listening to the faint whispers of the neighborhood, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. Clara's betrayal had been the breaking point, but it had also been the catalyst I needed to take back my life. And this was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up early, still simmering with anger from the night before. Clara's words echoed in my mind, her smug tone like nails on a chalkboard. She had dismissed me so easily, so casually, as though I were nothing more than an inconvenient roadblock on her way to someone else. I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not without consequences. I didn't even bother with breakfast. My thoughts were laser-focused on one thing: Leonard. I knew where he lived. He wasn't shy about flaunting his expensive apartment during casual conversations at company events. I grabbed my keys, got in my car, and drove across town, each mile fueling my resolve. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of Leonard's high-rise building, my hands were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles had turned white. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say, but I knew one thing for sure: he was going to hear me loud and clear. I marched into the lobby, my footsteps echoing against the marble floor. The concierge gave me a wary look, but I brushed past him and headed straight for the elevator. When I reached Leonard's floor, I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to his door and banged on it with a force that startled even me. It took a few moments, but finally, the door opened. Leonard stood there, looking half awake and completely caught off guard. He was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, a far cry from his usual polished appearance. "Ethan," he said, blinking in confusion. "What are you doing here?" I didn't waste any time. "We need to talk," I said, pushing past him into the apartment. "Wait, what?" he started, but I cut him off. "Don't play dumb, Leonard," I snapped, spinning around to face him. "You've been crossing a line with my wife for months, and I'm not going to stand for it anymore." Leonard held up his hands, clearly trying to calm me down. "Ethan, I don't know what you've been told, but I haven't done anything. I swear." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, come on. You think I didn't see the way she was hanging all over you last night? The way you let her?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I'll admit that Clara has been persistent, but I haven't encouraged her. If anything, I've been trying to keep my distance out of respect for you." "Respect?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You call letting her throw herself at you in front of me respectful?" Leonard frowned. "I didn't want to embarrass her, or you. I thought it was better to handle it quietly." I took a step closer, my anger boiling over. "Well, you didn't handle it, did you? You let it go on, and now my marriage is falling apart because of it." Leonard opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, a voice called out from behind him. "Leonard? Who is it?" My heart stopped. I knew that voice. A moment later, Clara emerged from the hallway, wearing nothing but a shower robe. Her hair was damp, and she looked as though she had just stepped out of the bathroom. The sight of her standing there, so casual, so unapologetic, sent a fresh wave of fury coursing through me. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice dangerously low. Clara's eyes widened when she saw me, and for a brief moment, she looked genuinely startled. But then she straightened, her expression shifting to one of defiance. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" she asked, crossing her arms over her chest. I ignored her, turning back to Leonard. "This is the respect you were talking about?" I demanded. "You let her stay here, and you expect me to believe you've been avoiding her advances?" Leonard looked panicked, his eyes darting between me and Clara. "Ethan, I didn't." but I didn't let him finish. The next thing I knew, my fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling back against the wall. The satisfying crack of bone echoed through the room as Leonard let out a cry of pain, clutching his face. "Ethan!" Clara shouted, rushing to Leonard's side. "What the hell is wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me?" I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. "What's wrong with you, Clara? You've destroyed our marriage, humiliated me, and now this? You don't even have the decency to hide it." Clara glared at me, her eyes blazing. "You're overreacting. It's not what it looks like." I laughed bitterly. "Not what it looks like? You're standing in his apartment wearing a robe, Clara. What exactly does it look like?" She didn't respond, and I didn't give her a chance to. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "You know what? I'm done," I said, my voice steady. "You can have him, Clara. You can have this whole mess. But don't expect me to stick around and clean it up." I turned to Leonard, who was still holding his jaw and glaring at me. "And you," I added, "you messed with the wrong guy. Enjoy her while you can, because I'm done with both of you." With that, I turned and walked out of the apartment, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of clarity. Clara had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine, and there was no going back. Clara was always good at masking reality with her own delusions. I imagine she spent the rest of that day lounging in Leonard's fancy apartment, sipping overpriced coffee and convincing herself she'd made the right choice. In her mind, Leonard was the golden ticket, the upgrade she believed she deserved. She probably told herself I was just bitter, that I'd overreacted, that I'd come crawling back eventually. But Clara had underestimated me, just as she had underestimated the man she thought was her future. I knew Clara too well. Her confidence wasn't just misplaced, it was laughable. She had likely already started imagining her new life. High-end dinners, designer clothes, trips to exotic destinations with Leonard footing the bill. To her, Leonard represented everything she thought she was entitled to. What she didn't realize was that Leonard's world wasn't as solid as it appeared. Leonard's life was a carefully constructed facade. On the surface, he had everything: a posh apartment, a luxury car, and a managerial position at an influential company. But beneath that polished veneer was a man walking a tightrope, his entire existence dependent on the goodwill of people who didn't know the truth about him. I didn't have all the details yet, but something about Leonard's demeanor during our confrontation at his apartment had stayed with me. He wasn't just nervous. He was terrified. There was something he wasn't saying, something bigger than my accusation that Clara had thrown herself at him. My gut told me to dig deeper. It didn't take long. A few calls to mutual acquaintances, a little time spent scrolling through social media, and a few emails to contacts who owed me favors painted a picture that Clara would never have suspected. Leonard was married, and not just in name. He had a wife, children, and an entirely separate life in another state. And here's the kicker. His wife wasn't just a homemaker blissfully unaware of her husband's antics. She was the daughter of the man who owned the company Leonard managed. Leonard's job, his wealth, his entire lifestyle, it all depended on keeping his wife happy and her family in the dark. If they ever found out about Clara, his world would come crashing down faster than he could say, promotion. I'll admit, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as I pieced it all together. Clara thought she'd found her Prince Charming, a man who would sweep her off her feet and carry her into a life of luxury. Instead, she'd hitched her wagon to a man whose empire was built on lies and borrowed time. Leonard, meanwhile, was starting to feel the pressure. The cracks in his polished exterior were beginning to show. His smugness during our confrontation had been an act, a desperate attempt to maintain control in a situation spiraling out of his grasp. I could picture him pacing his apartment after I left, clutching his bruised jaw and wondering how long he could keep his secrets hidden. What Clara didn't understand, what she would never understand, was that Leonard wasn't a savior. He was a man on the brink, juggling too many lies to keep them all in the air. She thought she was climbing the social ladder, but in reality, she was clinging to a rung that was about to snap. I'll never forget the irony of it all. Clara had dismissed me as though I were disposable, convinced she was trading up for a better life. And Leonard had let her believe it because it suited his ego. They both thought they were untouchable, that the consequences of their actions would never catch up with them. But the beauty of lies is that they have a way of unraveling, and when they do, the people who spun them are left standing in the wreckage. As I sat at my kitchen table that evening, nursing a drink and sifting through everything I'd learned, I felt a strange sense of calm. I didn't need to yell or scream or fight to prove a point. The truth was enough. Clara and Leonard had built their lives on illusions, and it was only a matter of time before those illusions shattered. And when they did, I'd be there to see it. Not to gloat, not to revel in their downfall, but to remind myself that walking away had been the best decision I'd ever made. For now, though, I waited. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that patience is a powerful weapon, and I was ready to wield it. The morning after my confrontation at Leonard's apartment, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of black coffee, the bitterness matching my mood. My thoughts churned relentlessly. Leonard's attempt to blame Clara for everything, Clara's smug confidence as she emerged from his bedroom, the way he flinched when I called him out. It all felt too rehearsed, too practiced. Something didn't add up. It wasn't enough to move on. I needed to know the full story. I wasn't doing it for closure or revenge. This was about taking back control, about stripping away the lies that had clouded my life for too long. Leonard had secrets, and I was going to uncover them. I started with the basics. Social media was surprisingly revealing. Leonard's accounts were curated to show off his life. Photos of luxury vacations, expensive cars, and lavish parties. But there was an odd gap in his timeline. No family photos, no personal details beyond his professional achievements. It struck me as calculated. He wanted people to see him as a successful, eligible bachelor, but I knew there had to be more. A few discreet calls to mutual acquaintances painted a clearer picture. Leonard wasn't just an ambitious manager. He was a man playing a dangerous game. His wealth and status weren't entirely his own. His wife, Miranda, was the daughter of a powerful businessman who owned the company Leonard managed. Their marriage wasn't just personal. It was professional, tying him directly to the family fortune. The more I dug, the clearer it became. Leonard's life was a house of cards, and Clara had no idea she'd hitched herself to a man who was one wrong move away from losing everything. But the most damning discovery came from a former colleague of Leonard's who had relocated to another state. "Oh, you mean Leonard?" they said, their voice tinged with amusement. "Yeah, he's married. 2 kids, if I remember correctly. His wife's family basically bankrolls his life." It was all the confirmation I needed. Leonard wasn't just a cheat. He was a fraud. A man pretending to be self-made while living off the goodwill of his wife and her family. And now he dragged Clara into his mess. That's when I decided it wasn't enough to know the truth. I needed to do something with it. Leonard had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. If he thought he could humiliate me and keep living his double life, he was sorely mistaken. I reached out to Miranda. She picked up on the 3rd ring, her voice calm and professional. "This is Miranda." "Hi, Miranda," I began, keeping my tone steady. "You don't know me, but I think we need to talk. It's about Leonard." There was a pause and then, "Go on." Over the next 20 minutes, I laid everything out. I told her about Clara, about the flirting that had escalated into an affair, about my confrontation at his apartment. I didn't sugarcoat anything, and I didn't hold back. When I finished, the line went silent. "Are you absolutely certain?" Miranda finally asked, her voice tight. "I am," I replied, "and I have proof." We arranged to meet later that week at a quiet cafe far from the prying eyes of the city. When she walked in, I was struck by how composed she seemed. Miranda exuded confidence, her tailored suit, her sharp gaze, the way she carried herself. This wasn't a woman who folded under pressure. This was a woman who handled things. I handed her the evidence. Photos, messages, and everything I'd gathered about Leonard's behavior. She sifted through it in silence, her expression unreadable. When she finally looked up, there was no sadness in her eyes, only cold determination. "Thank you for bringing this to me," she said, sliding the folder into her bag. "I'll handle it from here. Do you need anything else from me?" I asked. She shook her head. No, you've done enough. But rest assured, Leonard won't get away with this. True to her word, Miranda moved swiftly. Within days, the fallout began. Leonard was served with divorce papers, and Miranda's legal team wasted no time freezing his accounts and reclaiming control of the company. It turned out that Leonard's position wasn't as secure as he'd led people to believe. Without Miranda's father's support, he had no leverage, no power, and no future in the company. The rumors spread quickly. By the end of the week, Leonard's downfall was the talk of the neighborhood and the professional circles he once dominated. People whispered about his betrayal, his lies, and how Miranda had dismantled his life with surgical precision. Clara must have been blindsided. She'd bet everything on Leonard, convinced he was her ticket to a better life. Instead, she found herself tethered to a man who was now jobless, penniless, and utterly humiliated. I didn't need to hear her side of the story to know she was panicking. As for me, I felt a sense of closure. For the first time since this ordeal began, I wasn't reacting to someone else's actions. I was taking control. Miranda's strength and decisiveness had been a reminder of what it meant to stand up for yourself, to refuse to be a victim. Leonard had thought he could juggle two lives without consequence. Clara had thought she could trade me in for something better. They both learned the hard way that actions have consequences, and sometimes, those consequences come from the most unexpected places. The fallout was faster and more brutal than I could have ever imagined. Leonard's carefully curated life, his gleaming facade of success and charm, collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Miranda didn't just act swiftly, she acted decisively. Within days, the world Leonard had built on lies was dismantled, piece by piece, leaving him exposed for the fraud he truly was. First, Miranda's legal team served Leonard with divorce papers that were as meticulous as they were ruthless. She froze his accounts, took back the company, and ensured he had no financial footing left to stand on. The word spread quickly, starting within their corporate circles. Leonard's name was whispered in boardrooms and coffee shops, his reputation irreparably tarnished. Losing his job wasn't just a professional blow. It was a humiliation that cut to the core of his ego. The man who had once strutted through company parties, flashing his wealth and charm, now found himself jobless and ostracized. His connections, once a source of pride, vanished overnight. People who had once laughed at his jokes now avoided him like a plague, unwilling to associate with someone so thoroughly disgraced. As for Clara, her downfall was less public, but no less devastating. She had staked everything on Leonard, confidently walking out of our marriage as though she was upgrading her life. In her mind, she had traded me, a man she saw as ordinary, for someone extraordinary, someone who could give her the glamorous life she believed she deserved. But the truth hit her like a freight train. Leonard wasn't the golden ticket she'd imagined. He was a man whose success was built on borrowed time and someone else's fortune. When Miranda reclaimed her company and her power, Clara was left clinging to a man who had nothing left to give. I heard through the grapevine that Clara tried to save face in the beginning. She downplayed her involvement in the affair, painting herself as a victim of Leonard's manipulation. She spun her own narrative, claiming she'd been swept up in his lies, duped by his charm. But the evidence Miranda and I had uncovered was undeniable. The messages, the photos, the testimonies, they all pointed to Clara as a willing participant in the betrayal. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Linda, our self-appointed community reporter, wasted no time spreading the word. "Did you hear about Leonard?" she whispered to anyone who would listen. "And Clara?" I always knew something was off about her. The whispers grew louder, and soon, Clara and Leonard were the center of every conversation. Clara tried to put on a brave face, but it was clear she was floundering. The invitations to neighborhood gatherings stopped coming. Friends who had once admired her style and confidence now avoided her entirely. Even the women she considered her closest allies distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. I can only imagine the awkward silence that must have followed her attempts to explain herself. Clara was good at spinning stories, but even she couldn't weave her way out of the mess she had helped create. The more she tried to deny her complicity, the more people whispered behind her back. Leonard, on the other hand, withdrew entirely. Stripped of his job, his wealth, and his marriage, he retreated into the shadows. I heard he moved out of his luxury apartment shortly after Miranda reclaimed the company, downsizing to a modest rental far from the life he'd once flaunted. People said he looked like a shell of the man he used to be, his confident demeanor replaced by a tired, defeated air. For a while, I wondered if Clara would try to reach out to me, if she would attempt to spin her sob story in my direction. But she didn't. Or maybe she did, and I just didn't notice. I had blocked her number, her messages, her emails. As far as I was concerned, she was a ghost, a relic of a life I was determined to leave behind. Still, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of it all. Clara had believed she was trading up, leaving behind a life she saw as mundane for one she thought was extraordinary. But in her quest for more, she had lost everything. The luxury, the status, the admiration she craved. They were all gone, replaced by whispers of shame and a reputation she would never fully repair. One afternoon, I ran into Linda while walking to the cafe. She wasted no time bringing up the scandal. "It's funny, isn't it?" she said, leaning in conspiratorially. "Clara and Leonard thought they were so untouchable, and now look at them." "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Funny how things work out." But I wasn't laughing. I wasn't gloating. If anything, I felt a strange sense of closure. Watching Clara and Leonard's downfalls wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. As I walked away from Linda, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The chaos Clara and Leonard had brought into my life was finally over. They were no longer my problem. I knew it was only a matter of time before Clara tried to worm her way back into my life. People like her always did. It wasn't about love or remorse. It was about comfort. She had gambled everything on Leonard, and when that ship inevitably sank, she realized she was standing alone. Clara wasn't built to handle solitude. She thrived on being the center of someone's world. And when Leonard's world crumbled, she turned her sights back to me. The first message came a week after Leonard's downfall. A simple text, almost casual. "Ethan, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, a bitter laugh escaping me. It wasn't a plea, not yet. This was Clara testing the waters, trying to gauge whether I was still the man she could manipulate with a few well-chosen words. I didn't reply. The next day, she tried again. "Ethan, I know I've made mistakes, but we had so much together. Can we please have a conversation? Just one? I miss you." "Miss me?" I shook my head, the audacity of her words almost amusing. Clara didn't miss me. She missed the life I had provided, the stability, the comfort. She missed being able to control the narrative, to paint herself as the victim while I played the role of the forgiving husband. But I wasn't that man anymore. By the end of the week, her messages had grown more desperate. "Ethan, please. I need to see you. I was wrong. Okay? I see that now. I made a mistake with Leonard. He's not who I thought he was. But you were always there for me. I was stupid to take that for granted. Please, just give me a chance to make things right." I didn't reply. She started calling, her number flashing on my screen at all hours of the day. I let it ring every time, her voice filling my voicemail with increasingly emotional pleas. "Ethan, I know I don't deserve it, but please, I need to see you. I need to explain. We can fix this. I know we can." Each message sounded more unhinged than the last, and with every word, I felt my resolve strengthen. Clara had made her choices, and those choices had consequences. She wasn't coming back into my life. Not now, not ever. The final straw came one evening when she showed up at my house. I had just gotten home from work, my shoulders aching from a long day, when I saw her standing on the porch, her hands clasped together like a penitent child. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "Can I come in?" I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, blocking her path. "What do you want, Clara?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment, I almost believed they were genuine. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I let myself get caught up in something I didn't understand. But I see it now. I see how much I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. Please, Ethan, Let me fix this. I stared at her, my expression cold. Fix this? I repeated. You think you can undo everything you've done with a few tears and some empty words? She flinched but didn't back down. I know it's going to take time, but I'll do whatever it takes. I just need you to give me a chance. I let out a bitter laugh. Clara, the time for chances is over. You had one, and you threw it away for Leonard. How'd that work out for you? Her face crumpled, the weight of her decisions finally sinking in. I was stupid, she sobbed. I thought he was. I don't know what I thought. But he's not you, Ethan. He's not half the man you are. I shook my head, stepping back into the house and gripping the edge of the door. You're right about one thing. Leonard isn't me. But you didn't want me, Clara. You wanted something shiny and new, something you thought would make you happy. Now you have nothing, and you want me to pick up the pieces? No, not this time. She reached out, her voice breaking. Ethan, please. Goodbye, Clara, I said firmly, closing the door in her face. As I locked the door, I heard her start to cry, her muffled sobs carrying through the wood. It didn't affect me the way she probably thought it would. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. I blocked her number that night, cutting off the last thread of her connection to me. Clara had made her choices, and she had to live with them. I had spent too many years letting her take advantage of my kindness, too many nights wondering what I had done wrong. But now, I knew the truth. The problem wasn't me. It was her. I never imagined I'd form any kind of connection with Miranda beyond the brief interaction where I handed over the evidence of Leonard's betrayal. That meeting had been all business, just a necessary step in exposing the truth. But life has a way of surprising you, and Miranda turned out to be more than just Leonard's soon-to-be ex-wife. A few weeks after everything went public, Miranda reached out to me. Her message was simple and polite. Ethan, I wanted to thank you again for coming to me with the truth. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. We've both been through a lot. At first, I wasn't sure how to respond. Our connection was born out of shared pain, and I wasn't eager to relive the events that had brought us to this point. But something about her message felt genuine, not just a polite gesture, but an offer of real understanding. I replied with a brief acknowledgement, and that was it, for a while. But as time passed, and the dust from our respective storms began to settle, we found ourselves talking more often. At first, it was through texts or emails, quick exchanges about the fallout from Leonard's and Clara's actions. Leonard's still trying to play the victim, she wrote once. His lawyers are grasping at straws, but they've got nothing. I responded, sounds familiar. Clara's spinning her own sob story to anyone who'll listen. Too bad for her, I'm not buying it. The tone of our conversations gradually shifted. We started sharing more than just updates about Leonard and Clara. Miranda told me about her kids, how her oldest had taken the news surprisingly well, while her youngest was still struggling to understand why Dad wasn't coming home. I told her about my attempts to pick up old hobbies, like playing guitar and working on a long-forgotten woodworking project in the garage. One day, after a particularly heavy exchange about the mess Leonard had left behind, Miranda suggested meeting in person. We could both use a break, she said. How about coffee? Just two people trying to figure out how to move forward. I agreed, and we met at a quiet cafe downtown. Seeing her outside the context of our shared turmoil was eye-opening. Miranda was sharp and composed, but there was a warmth to her that I hadn't noticed before. She talked about her plans to refocus on her career, not just to provide for her kids, but to reclaim a sense of independence she felt she'd lost during her marriage. I spent so many years building Leonard up, she said, stirring her coffee, helping him navigate the business, smoothing over his rough edges. And all the while, he was taking me for granted. Never again. Her words resonated deeply. I get that, I said. I put so much energy into making Clara happy, trying to be the husband she wanted. But it was never enough. She always wanted more. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the shared understanding between us saying more than words ever could. From that day on, Miranda and I started meeting more regularly. Sometimes it was for coffee, other times for a quick walk through the park. There was no romantic tension, no pressure to be anything more than two people finding solace in each other's company. She became a sounding board for me, and I for her. When she struggled with balancing work and parenting, I listened and offered encouragement. When I doubted my ability to rebuild my life, she reminded me that I was stronger than I gave myself credit for. "You're doing better than you think," she said once as we sat on a park bench, watching her kids play. "You've already taken the hardest steps. Now it's just about figuring out what comes next." Her words stuck with me. I started focusing on the small victories. Finishing the woodworking project in my garage, reconnecting with old friends, even signing up for a photography class I'd always been curious about. Each step felt like a piece of myself returning, a reminder that my life wasn't defined by Clara or what she had done to me. Miranda, too, was thriving in her own way. She threw herself into her work, taking on new clients and expanding her reach in the industry. Watching her juggle her responsibilities with such grace was inspiring. She wasn't just surviving, she was rebuilding. As time went on, our conversations shifted from the past to the future. We talked about the things we wanted, not just for ourselves, but for the lives we were rebuilding. For Miranda, it was about creating a stable, loving environment for her kids. For me, it was about rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. "Do you think you'll ever date again?" she asked me once, half joking but with a hint of genuine curiosity. "Maybe," I said with a shrug, "but not until I'm ready. For now, I'm just focused on figuring out who I am without Clara in the picture." She smiled at that. "Good. You deserve to take your time." Our bond wasn't something I had anticipated, but it became a cornerstone of my healing process. Miranda and I didn't need to be anything more than what we were, two people who understood each other in a way few others could. And in that understanding, we found the strength to move forward. Together, but separate, stronger than we'd been before. It was inevitable that Clara would face the fallout from her choices, though I doubt she ever saw it coming. Clara had always been the type to thrive on appearances, carefully curating her image to be the charming, sociable wife who could light up a room. But beneath the polished exterior was someone who thrived on manipulation, using people and their admiration to fill the voids in her life. She thought her charm was unshakable, that no matter what, she could control the narrative. But once the truth about her affair with Leonard came to light, the cracks in her carefully constructed facade began to show. At first, Clara seemed unfazed, even arrogant. She played the victim card, telling anyone who would listen that I had overreacted, that I was cold and controlling, and that her actions had been a result of feeling neglected in our marriage. She leaned heavily on her network of friends, assuming they'd rally around her, as they always had. For a while, some of them did. Linda, our neighborhood gossip, was one of the first to try to mediate. "Ethan," she said one day when we crossed paths outside my house, "I think you're being too hard on Clara. She's clearly going through something. Maybe if you two sat down and talked?" I stopped her mid-sentence, my voice calm but firm. "Linda, with all due respect, you don't know the whole story. Clara's choices were hers to make, and now she has to live with the consequences. I've moved on, and I suggest you let her do the same." Linda's expression shifted to one of surprise. She wasn't used to me standing my ground, but she didn't press further. It didn't take long for the tide to turn against Clara. The whispers started small, snippets of conversations at the grocery store, murmurs at neighborhood events. "Did you hear what she did?" someone would say. "Imagine cheating on Ethan with Leonard of all people. And now look at her. What does she have to show for it?" Clara's friends, once loyal to a fault, began to distance themselves. Some were polite, offering vague excuses for why they couldn't meet for coffee or attend her impromptu gatherings. Others were less subtle, outright ignoring her calls or cutting her off mid-sentence when she tried to explain herself. I didn't need to keep tabs on her to know she was struggling. It was evident in the small, noticeable changes. The once polished car she drove was replaced with a modest, older model. Her impeccable wardrobe seemed less vibrant, as though the confidence she once carried had faded along with her reputation. The breaking point came when Clara was forced to move out of our house. With the divorce underway and her access to our joint finances revoked, she could no longer afford the lifestyle she had taken for granted. I heard through the grapevine that she'd found a small apartment across town, far from the upscale neighborhood she once called home. It wasn't just the financial blow that hurt her. It was the loss of status. Clara had built her identity around being the queen bee of the community, the woman everyone wanted to befriend or impress. Without that, she was left floundering, unsure of how to navigate a world where she was no longer admired. Her isolation wasn't entirely self-inflicted, though. Leonard's downfall had been just as public, and the scandal surrounding their affair had cast a shadow over both of them. People who once sang their praises now treated them as pariahs, unwilling to be associated with the drama and betrayal that had defined their lives. There was a certain irony in it all. Clara had always prided herself on being the life of the party, the woman who could charm anyone with a smile and a well-placed compliment. But when the truth came out, her charm wasn't enough to save her. People saw through the facade, and what they found beneath wasn't worth sticking around for. I'll admit, there was a part of me that felt vindicated. Watching Clara face the consequences of her actions was a stark reminder that the truth always comes to light, no matter how carefully you try to bury it. But I also felt a twinge of pity. As much as she had hurt me, as much as she had betrayed my trust, there was a part of me that remembered the woman I had once loved, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with. That woman was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. One evening, as I sat on my porch, sipping a cup of tea, Linda approached me again. This time, she seemed hesitant, almost guilty. "I just saw Clara at the store," she said, her voice low. She looked different, tired, worn out. I didn't respond immediately, letting her words hang in the air. Finally, I said, "Choices have consequences, Linda." She made hers. Now she has to live with them. Linda nodded slowly, as though she finally understood. Clara's isolation was a slow, painful process, one that she had brought upon herself. She had spent so much of her life chasing admiration, but when the facade cracked, there was nothing left to admire. I never reached out to her. I didn't need to. Clara had made her bed, and now she was lying in it, alone. The chapter of my life that had Clara in it was officially closed. It wasn't a clean break. There were messy emotions, moments of doubt, and whispers of what could have been. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I felt a sense of clarity that had been missing for years. The weight of her betrayal had lifted, replaced by something lighter, something new, hope. Moving on wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I started with small steps, fixing up the house, changing the decor, reclaiming the space as my own. Each stroke of paint and rearranged piece of furniture felt symbolic, like I was wiping away the stains of the past. The house no longer felt like a battleground of unspoken resentments and betrayal. It felt like home again. Miranda became a steady presence in my life. We didn't rush into anything. Our connection wasn't born out of desperation or revenge, but a mutual understanding. She'd text me updates about her kids or send me articles she thought I'd find interesting. Occasionally, we'd meet for coffee or lunch, and those conversations became something I looked forward to. She was sharp, funny, and grounded, a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. One afternoon, as we sat at a small cafe, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Do you think you'll ever let yourself love again?" I paused, her words lingering in the air. "I don't know," I admitted. "I think I need to figure out who I am first. For so long, I defined myself as Clara's husband. Now, it's about learning to be just Ethan." She nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. But for what it's worth, I think you're doing a damn good job of it." Her encouragement stayed with me. Slowly, I began rediscovering myself. I picked up my guitar again, the strings stiff from years of neglect, and let the music flow through me like an old friend. I took up photography, capturing moments that reminded me of the beauty in life's simplicity. I even started traveling, nothing extravagant, just weekend road trips to places I'd always wanted to see but never made time for. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, my phone buzzed. It was Miranda, sending a picture of her kids building a fort out of blankets. Her caption read, "We've moved on, haven't we?" I smiled and typed back, "We have, and it feels good." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was living again. The scars from my past hadn't disappeared, but they no longer defined me. I was free, finally free, to write my own story. And for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. I couldn't shake the feeling that this trip was going to be something special, something that would pull us all together as a family. Me, Clarissa, and her whole crew, her dad Gregory, her mom Marilyn, and her little sister Nora, who could do no wrong in their eyes, were headed to Cape Haven, a gorgeous coastal town I'd only seen in pictures. The oceanfront resort we booked promised luxury, relaxation, and maybe a chance to finally feel like I belonged with them. I'd been married to Clarissa for 2 years, but her family always kept me at arm's length, like I was some guy they hadn't quite decided to trust yet. This trip, though, I figured it'd be different. I packed my bags with hope, imagining long dinners where we'd laugh, share stories, and maybe even bond a little. The drive down was smooth, Clarissa humming along to the radio while I pictured us all sitting by the water, the sun setting, me finally breaking through their walls. When we pulled up to the resort, the salty air hit me first, then the sound of waves crashing against the shore. It was perfect. The lobby gleamed with marble floors and chandeliers, and I felt a swell of pride knowing I'd chipped in big to make this happen. We checked in, dropped our bags, and headed to dinner. The waiter led us through the restaurant, all fancy white tablecloths and soft music, to a long table set for the group. I was grinning, ready to pull out a chair next to Clarissa, when Gregory's voice cut through the air like a dull knife. "He needs his own table," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. I froze, my hand still on the chair. I looked at him, waiting for the punchline, because surely this was a joke, right? His face didn't crack a smile. Marilyn kept her eyes on her menu like I wasn't even there. Nora smirked a little, and Clarissa, my wife, the woman who's supposed to have my back, just stared at her hands. I laughed, a short, awkward sound, thinking maybe I'd misheard. "What?" I said, still standing there like an idiot. Gregory waved his hand toward a small table in the corner, 10 feet away, like it was no big deal. "Over there," he said, his tone flat, final. I looked around, waiting for someone to say something, anything, but the silence was heavy. The waiter shifted uncomfortably, holding a stack of menus, clearly unsure what to do. My chest tightened, and I felt my face heat up. Was this really happening? I'd driven 6 hours, paid for half this damn trip, and now I was being shoved aside like some unwanted guest. I thought about arguing, about planting myself right next to Clarissa anyway, but the way they all just sat there, Gregory with his smug chin up, Marilyn pretending I didn't exist, Nora sipping her water like this was normal, made me feel small. I swallowed hard, grabbed my jacket off the chair, and walked over to the little table in the corner. The waiter followed, mumbling an apology as he set a menu down in front of me. I sat there, staring at the words on the page, not reading a damn thing, while their voices drifted over, laughter, clinking glasses, the sound of a family I wasn't part of. I kept glancing at Clarissa, waiting for her to look my way, to wave me over, to fix this. She didn't. She just picked at her salad, nodding along to whatever her dad was saying. My stomach twisted, but I ordered anyway a steak, rare, because at least I could enjoy something tonight. The food came fast, and I cut into it, chewing slowly, tasting nothing but bitterness. They were over there toasting, probably to some family memory I'd never be part of, while I sat alone, the ocean view mocking me through the window. I kept telling myself it was a misunderstanding, that tomorrow would be better, that this was just a weird first night thing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. This wasn't a welcome. This was a message, and I was starting to hear it loud and clear. By the time the check came, I didn't even bother looking up. I paid my share alone, of course, and walked back to the room without a word. Clarissa didn't say anything when she climbed into bed later, just turned off the light like nothing had happened. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell we got here. This was supposed to bring us closer, but all I felt was the distance growing, a gap I wasn't sure I could cross. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd figure it out. Tomorrow, I'd make it right. But even as I drifted off, that little table in the corner stuck in my mind, a sharp reminder that maybe I didn't belong here at all. I woke up the next morning with a knot in my gut, replaying last night over and over like a bad movie I couldn't turn off. Gregory's voice, "He needs his own table," kept echoing in my head, and the way Clarissa just sat there, doing nothing, stung worse than I wanted to admit. I rolled over in bed, the sheets cool against my skin, and looked at her. She was still asleep, her dark hair fanned out on the pillow, looking peaceful, like none of it mattered to her. I wanted to shake her awake, demand answers, ask why she let her family treat me like that. But I didn't. Instead, I got up, splashed water on my face, and told myself today would be different. I'd make it different. I pulled on a shirt and jeans, grabbed my phone, and headed down to the lobby, figuring I'd catch them at breakfast and start fresh. The resort was alive with morning light, the smell of coffee and salt water mixing in the air. I texted Clarissa as I walked. "Hey, where you at? Breakfast?" No reply. I shrugged it off. She's slow to wake up sometimes, and kept going, my sneakers quiet on the polished floors. When I got to the hotel cafe, I spotted them right away. There they were, all four of them, sitting at a round table by the window, sunlight pouring in, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. Gregory was tearing into a stack of pancakes, Marilyn sipping her coffee, Nora scrolling her phone between bites of toast. Clarissa was there too, smiling at something her mom said, her plate half empty. My chest tightened. They were halfway through their meal, and not a single spot was set for me. No extra chair, no napkin, nothing. I stood there for a second, just watching, feeling like I'd walked into someone else's life. I cleared my throat and stepped closer. "Morning," I said, forcing a grin, hoping they'd wave me over. Gregory glanced up, his fork paused midair, and gave me a look like I'd interrupted something important. "Oh," he said, "we figured you'd find us." That was it. No apology, no grab a seat, just that flat, careless tone. Marilyn kept her eyes on her mug, stirring it even though there was nothing left to stir. Nora didn't even look up. And Clarissa? She flicked her gaze to me for half a second, then dropped it back to her plate, poking at some scrambled eggs. I stood there, hands in my pockets, waiting for anything to make this feel normal. Nothing came. "Right," I said, nodding like it made sense, even though it didn't. I pulled out a chair anyway, the scrape of it loud against the floor, and sat down. The waiter hurried over, looking confused, and asked if I wanted a menu. "Yeah, sure," I muttered, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. They went right back to talking, some story about a cousin I'd never met, while I sat there, the odd man out, staring at a menu I didn't even want. I ordered coffee and a bagel, just to have something to do with my hands. The whole time, I kept sneaking looks at Clarissa, waiting for her to say something, to include me, to act like my wife. She didn't. She just nodded along to her dad's booming voice, laughing when Nora chimed in with a sarcastic little jab. I sipped my coffee when it came, the bitterness matching the taste in my mouth. "So," I tried, leaning forward, "what's the plan today?" Gregory didn't even pause, just kept chewing. Marilyn gave a vague, "Oh, we'll see," and turned back to her daughter. Clarissa shrugged, actually shrugged, and said, "We'll figure it out." That was it. No invite, no details, just a brush off. I leaned back, my jaw tight, and stared out the window at the ocean rolling in. It hit me then, sitting there with my cold bagel and their empty plates, that this wasn't a one-time thing. This was how it was going to be. I looked at Clarissa again, her face soft and familiar, and waited for her to meet my eyes. She didn't. When they finished, they all stood up, stretching and chatting about heading to the beach or maybe a boat ride. No one asked if I was coming. I stayed in my seat, watching them file out, their voices fading down the hall. My phone buzzed, finally, a text from her. "Meet us later if you want," it said. If I want. Like it was my choice to be left out. I set the phone down, finished my coffee in one long gulp, and stared at the empty table they'd left behind. That's when she caught up to me in the hall, her flip-flops slapping the floor. "Hey," she said, casual as anything, "don't take it personal, okay? It's just their way. Their way." Like that was supposed to make it fine, like I should just smile and nod while they treated me like I didn't matter. I looked at her, searching her face for something guilt, maybe, or an apology, but all I got was that lazy shrug again. "Sure," I said, my voice low. "No big deal." But it was. It was a huge deal, and I could feel it sinking into me, heavy and cold. I walked back to the room alone, the sound of the waves outside doing nothing to calm the storm kicking up inside me. This wasn't just their way. This was a line in the sand, and I was on the wrong side of it. I woke up the next morning determined to shake off the mess from yesterday. The sun was barely up, painting the room in soft gold through the curtains, and I told myself today was a clean slate. I'd get up early, catch them before they could leave me behind again, and make this trip work. Clarissa was still out cold next to me, her breathing slow and steady, so I slipped out of bed quietly, pulled on a t-shirt and shorts, and grabbed my phone. I shot her a quick text, "Heading to the cafe?" meet me for breakfast, and headed down. The resort was quiet this early, just a few staff wiping down tables and the faint hum of a vacuum somewhere. I liked it like this, calm and empty, no one to dodge or explain myself to. I got to the cafe and picked a table near the window, the same spot they'd been at yesterday, figuring they'd show up soon. I ordered a coffee and sat there, watching the waves roll in, sipping slowly while I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. My phone stayed silent. No buzz, no text back from Clarissa. I checked it anyway, just in case I'd missed something. Nothing. The coffee went cold in my hands, and I started to feel that same twist in my stomach from last night. But I pushed it down. They'd come, I told myself. They had to. Finally, I heard voices, Gregory's loud bark of a laugh, Marilyn's softer tone trailing behind. I looked up, and there they were, walking into the cafe like they owned the place. Clarissa was with them, her hair tied back, sunglasses perched on her head, smiling at something Nora said. They didn't even glance my way, just headed straight to a table across the room. My heart sank as I watched them sit down, the waiter rushing over with menus. For menus. For chairs. No empty spot, no wave to call me over, nothing. I sat there, frozen, my mug halfway to my mouth, watching them settle in like I wasn't even there. Gregory said something, and they all laughed, Clarissa too, her head tipping back like she didn't have a care in the world. I set the mug down harder than I meant to, the clink loud enough to make a guy at the next table glance over. Hey, I called out, standing up, my voice cutting through the chatter. They turned, all four of them, like they'd just noticed me for the first time. Gregory raised an eyebrow, his fork already digging into a plate of bacon that must have come fast. Oh, you're up, he said, like it was some big surprise. We figured you'd find us. There it was again, that same line, like it excused everything. Marilyn gave me a tight little smile, then went back to buttering her toast. Nora scrolled her phone, ignoring me completely. Clarissa met my eyes for a second, then looked away, picking up her coffee like it was more interesting than me. I grabbed my chair and dragged it over, the legs scraping the floor, and plopped it down at the end of their table. Mind if I join? I said, keeping my tone light, even though my hands were clenched under the table. No one answered, but Gregory shrugged, so I took it as a yes. The waiter hustled over, looking flustered, and handed me a menu. I didn't even open it, just told him to bring me whatever they were having. I sat there, trying to catch up, listening to them talk about some boat trip they'd done years ago, before I was around. I nodded along, waiting for a gap to jump in, but every time I opened my mouth, someone else filled the space. Gregory with a loud opinion, Marilyn with a quiet aside, Nora with a giggle. Clarissa didn't say much, just sipped her coffee and picked at her eggs, her eyes anywhere but on me. My food came, bacon, eggs, toast, and I ate it mechanically, chewing through the silence they built around me. It was like I was invisible, a ghost at their table, and the more I sat there, the louder it got in my head. I tried again, leaning forward. So what's on for today? I asked, forcing a smile. Gregory didn't even look up, just mumbled, we'll see, between bites. Marilyn nodded vaguely, and Nora didn't react at all. Clarissa gave me that same quick glance, then nothing. I pushed my plate away, half-eaten, and leaned back, my jaw tight. They finished up, chatting about heading to the pool or maybe the beach, tossing ideas around like I wasn't sitting right there. When they stood up, stretching and grabbing their stuff, I stayed put, watching them. You coming? Clarissa said finally, her voice flat, like it didn't matter either way. Yeah, I said, standing, but they were already moving, walking off without waiting. I followed a few steps behind, my hands stuffed in my pockets, the distance between us growing with every step. Back in the room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, her text still unanswered on the screen. That's when it hit me. I could have screamed in that cafe, yelled until my throat gave out, and they wouldn't have cared. They'd have kept eating, kept laughing, kept pretending I wasn't there. I tossed the phone onto the nightstand and ran a hand through my hair, my chest heavy. This wasn't just them being rude. This was them telling me I didn't belong, and Clarissa wasn't doing a damn thing to stop it. I decided right then, I was done trying. If they wanted me out, fine. I'd figure out how to deal with it my own way. I woke up the next day with a weight pressing down on me, like the air itself was heavier than it should have been. The room was quiet, Clarissa still asleep beside me, her breathing soft and even, like nothing in the world could touch her. I didn't feel that peace, not after yesterday, not after sitting at that cafe table like some stray they'd reluctantly let tag along. I lay there for a minute, staring at the ceiling, the fan spinning lazy circles above me, and decided I wasn't chasing them anymore. If they didn't want me around, I'd stop begging for a seat at their table. I got up, pulled on a pair of shorts and a faded t-shirt, and slipped out without waking her. The resort was waking up too, staff rolling carts down the halls, the faint smell of fresh bread drifting from somewhere. I grabbed a coffee from the lobby and sat outside, the morning sun warm on my face, the ocean stretching out in front of me. I tried to enjoy it, to let the sound of the waves wash away the mess in my head, but it didn't work. All I could think about was how they'd left me out again and again. Breakfast, sure, but I had a feeling it didn't stop there. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, scrolling through Nora's feed just to see. There it was, pictures from yesterday afternoon, all of them on a sailboat, grinning against a backdrop of blue water and sky. Gregory with his arm around Clarissa, Marilyn shielding her eyes from the sun, Nora posing at the helm. Not a single shot with me in it. Not a mention that I even existed. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the like button, then swiped it away. They'd gone sailing without me, no text, no heads up, nothing. I checked Clarissa's page too, same deal. More pics, more smiles, more proof I wasn't part of their little world. My coffee tasted bitter now, even with the sugar I'd dumped in it, and I set it down on the table, my hands curling into fists. I thought about texting her, asking why, but what was the point? She'd just shrug it off like she always did. I stayed out there for a while, watching people come and go, couples holding hands, families chasing kids around, feeling more alone than I ever had. By the time I went back to the room, Clarissa was up, brushing her hair in front of the mirror. She didn't look at me when I walked in, just kept pulling the brush through her dark strands like it was the most important thing in the world. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you guys have fun yesterday?" She paused, just for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, it was nice. Sailing was good. That was it. No sorry, no explanation, just it was nice." I leaned against the door frame, watching her, waiting for more. Nothing came. "Would have been cool to join," I said, crossing my arms. She turned then, finally meeting my eyes, and I saw that flicker of annoyance I knew too well. "You could have come if you wanted," she said, like it was my fault. "We didn't know where you were." I laughed, short and sharp, because that was a lie, and we both knew it. "You didn't tell me," I shot back, stepping closer. "No one said a word about sailing, or the vineyard tour I saw on Nora's story. You just left." She rolled her eyes, setting the brush down with a little clack. "You're being sensitive," she said, her voice flat. "It's just how my family is. They like to stick to their traditions, okay? It's not about you." I stared at her, my jaw tight, feeling the heat creep up my neck. Traditions. That was her excuse, like it made sense to ditch your husband without a heads up, to post pictures all over the internet while I sat around wondering where the hell everyone went. "Right?" I said, nodding slow, "traditions." She turned back to the mirror, picking up her brush again, like the conversation was over. I wanted to yell, to grab her by the shoulders and make her see how messed up this was, but I didn't. I just stood there, watching her, the woman I'd promised my life to, acting like I was the problem for wanting to be included. "So what's today?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "Anything I should know about?" She shrugged, God, that shrug again, and said, "I don't know. We'll figure it out. Maybe the beach." No invite, no plan, just more of the same. I took a deep breath, letting it out slow, and smiled at her. Not a happy smile, but a calm one, quiet, like I'd figured something out. "Perfect," I said, my voice low. "Because I have my own way too." She didn't catch it, didn't even look up, just kept brushing her hair like nothing had changed. But something had. I walked over to the window, staring out at the ocean, my mind racing. I'd been playing their game, sitting alone at dinner, chasing them to breakfast, scrolling through their pictures like some outsider begging for a crumb. No more. If they had their traditions, fine. I'd start my own. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I could feel it building inside me, a spark of something hard and steady. I turned back to her, watching her fuss with her hair, and kept that smile on my face. "Yeah," I said, mostly to myself, my way. She didn't hear me, or if she did, she didn't care. But that was okay. She'd figure it out soon enough. I lay awake that night, long after Clarissa's breathing settled into that slow, deep rhythm of sleep. The room was dark, just a sliver of moonlight slipping through the curtains, casting shadows on the wall. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Her shrug, It's just how they are. The way she let her family push me out without a second thought. It played on a loop in my head, each memory sharper than the last. Gregory's smug voice, Marilyn's blank stare, Nora's little smirk, and Clarissa doing nothing. I turned onto my side, staring at her outline under the blanket, and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't mad anymore, not the hot, loud kind of mad. This was colder, quieter, like a decision I didn't even have to argue with myself about. I was done waiting for them to let me in. If they wanted to play their game, I'd play mine. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and grabbed my laptop from the desk. The screen glowed bright in the dark, stinging my eyes as I sat on the couch by the window. I pulled up every reservation I'd made for this trip, everything I'd put on my card, under my name, because I'd wanted to treat them, to show I could be part of this family. The resort rooms, the car rental, the fancy dinners, the spa day Marilyn wouldn't shut up about, the yacht tour Gregory kept bragging he'd booked. It was all mine to give, and now it was mine to take away. I started with the rooms. 3 clicks, and their suite was gone, canceled without a trace. The confirmation email popped up, reservation terminated. I didn't hesitate, moved on to the car rental next. Another few clicks, and the SUV we'd been using was off the books, set to be picked up by the agency at dawn. I felt a little jolt in my chest, not guilt, but something alive, like I was finally doing something instead of just taking it. The dinners, those overpriced meals they'd eaten without me, canceled. The spa day Marilyn had been gushing about, with her massages and facials, erased. I pictured her face when she found out, that tight little frown she'd get, and it almost made me smile. The yacht tour was last, Gregory's big prize, the one he'd been yapping about since we got here. I hovered over the cancel button for a second, imagining him standing at the dock, red-faced and confused, then clicked it. Gone. Every single thing they'd taken for granted, every plan they'd made without me, wiped out in under 10 minutes. I wasn't done yet, though. I'd brought a portable Wi-Fi router for the trip, my name, my account, my password. I logged in, changed it to something they'd never guess, and disconnected every device but mine. Let them figure out how to post their precious pictures now. By the time I shut the laptop, the clock on the nightstand said 3:47 a.m. The room was still, Clarissa hadn't moved, and the ocean outside hummed like it was cheering me on. I leaned back on the couch, my hands behind my head, and let out a long, slow breath. It felt good, better than I'd expected. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was in control. I crawled back into bed, the sheets cool against my skin, and closed my eyes, knowing sunrise would bring a reckoning I'd set in motion. When I woke up, the room was bright, and Clarissa was already in the shower, the water running loud behind the closed door. I got up, packed a small bag, just my clothes, my wallet, my keys, and checked my phone. No alerts yet, no panicked calls. They wouldn't notice until they tried to use something I'd taken away. I grabbed the car keys from the dresser, the ones for the rental I'd canceled, and headed out. The hallway was quiet, the resort still waking up, and I made it to the parking lot without seeing a soul. The SUV sat there, gleaming in the morning light, and I tossed my bag in the back. I drove off, not looking back, the engine humming under me as I left Cape Haven behind. 2 towns over, I found a new place, a high-end resort with a view that put ours to shame. I booked a solo suite, handed over my card, and walked into a room that was mine alone. No Gregory, no Marilyn, no Clarissa shrugging me off. I ordered breakfast, eggs, bacon, a stack of pancakes with extra syrup, and sat by the window, watching the ocean roll in. The first bite was heaven, the coffee hot and strong, and I felt lighter than I had in days. My phone buzzed, then Clarissa's name on the screen. I let it ring, took another bite, and watched it go to voicemail. A minute later, it buzzed again, Gregory this time. Then Nora. I didn't answer. When Clarissa called back, I picked up, leaning back in my chair, the sun warm on my face. "Where are you?" she said, her voice tight, cracking a little. "Everything's gone, the rooms, the car, everything." I chewed slowly, savoring the pancake, then swallowed. "I'm enjoying my vacation," I said, calm as anything. "My way." She started to say something, but I hung up, set the phone down, and took another sip of coffee. This was it, my tradition now. And I wasn't going back. I sat there in my new suite, the tray of breakfast still warm in front of me, the ocean stretching out beyond the window like a promise I'd finally kept to myself. The pancakes were gone, the coffee cup half empty, and I felt this strange calm settle over me, like I'd shed something heavy I didn't even know I'd been carrying. The phone kept buzzing on the table, Clarissa, Gregory, Nora, one after the other, like a swarm of bees I'd kicked loose. I didn't pick up, not yet. I wanted them to feel it first, to wake up to the mess I'd made of their perfect little trip. I pictured Gregory stomping around the lobby, barking at some poor desk clerk about the canceled rooms, Marilyn clutching her purse like it could save her spa day, Nora whining about the Wi-Fi, and Clarissa, my wife, the one who was supposed to stand by me, scrambling to figure out where I'd gone. I let the calls stack up, the voicemails piling in, and leaned back in my chair, the sun warming my face. This was my morning now, and I wasn't sharing it with anyone. After a while, I played the first voicemail, Clarissa's voice, sharp and shaky, spilling out of the speaker. Where are you? The hotel says our rooms are canceled. The car's gone. We don't know what's happening. Call me back, please. I deleted it, moved to the next one. Gregory this time, his tone all gravel and rage. What the hell did you do, you little punk? Fix this now. I smirked, deleted that one too. Nora's was short, just a whiny, this isn't funny, where's the Wi-Fi? I didn't bother saving it. They kept coming, one after another, a chorus of panic I'd orchestrated with a few clicks the night before. I finished my coffee, letting the bitterness linger on my tongue, and decided it was time to answer. Clarissa's name flashed up again, and I picked up, keeping my voice steady, casual, like I was ordering room service. Hey, I said, swirling the last sip in my cup. Where are you? She snapped, her words tumbling out fast. Everything's gone. The rooms, the car, the dinner reservations. What did you do? I set the cup down, leaned forward, and took a slow breath. I'm enjoying my vacation, I said, letting each word hang there. My way. There was a pause, a long one, and I could hear her breathing, quick and uneven, like she couldn't decide whether to yell or cry. What's that supposed to mean? She finally said, her voice cracking. It means I'm done, I told her, calm as the sea outside my window. You wanted your traditions? Fine. I've got mine now. I hung up before she could answer, tossed the phone onto the table, and stood up to stretch. The suite was quiet, just the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant crash of waves. I walked to the balcony, slid the glass door open, and stepped out. The air was warm, salty, and clean, and I leaned on the railing, looking out at the water. This was mine, my spot, my peace, my rules. I didn't know what they were doing back in Cape Haven, and for the first time, I didn't care. I went back inside, grabbed my wallet, and headed down to the resort's restaurant. It was lunchtime now, the place buzzing with people, couples laughing, kids running around, waiters weaving through with trays. I took a table by the window, ordered a burger and a beer, and watched the world go by. My phone buzzed again, Clarissa texting this time. This isn't funny. Where are you? We need the car. I ignored it, took a bite of the burger when it came, the meat juicy and hot, and washed it down with a cold gulp of beer. Another text. Please, just tell us what's going on. I didn't reply. Let them figure it out. They'd realize soon enough that every reservation, every little luxury they'd been counting on, was tied to me, and I'd cut the strings. I finished my meal slow, savoring it, then ordered a slice of cheesecake just because I could. The phone kept lighting up, Gregory now, with a string of curses I didn't bother reading, then Clarissa again, her tone shifting from mad to desperate. We're stuck. Okay? Tell me where you are. I wiped my hands on a napkin, leaned back, and typed out a single word. Good. Sent it, then turned the phone face down. I wasn't going back, not to the resort, not to their table, not to the life where I was the guy they forgot. I paid the bill, left a big tip, and walked out into the afternoon sun. The new resort had a pool, a sleek blue rectangle surrounded by lounge chairs, and I grabbed one, kicking off my shoes and lying back. The water sparkled, kids splashed at the shallow end, and I closed my eyes, letting the heat soak into me. This was my vacation now, no chasing, no waiting, no pretending I fit where I didn't. My phone buzzed one more time, Clarissa's voice in another voicemail, softer now, almost pleading. I don't know what you're doing, but we can talk about this. Just come back. I deleted it without a second thought. I wasn't talking. I wasn't fixing. I was done. The sun climbed higher, the day stretched out ahead of me, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time free. They could panic all they wanted. I'd started this fire, and I was going to let it burn. I woke up the next morning in my new suite, the sheets crisp and cool against my skin, the sound of the ocean drifting in through the cracked balcony door. It was early, the sky still soft with dawn, and I lay there for a minute, letting the quiet sink in. No buzzing phone, no footsteps in the hall, just me in this space I'd carved out for myself. Yesterday felt like a dream. The calls, the texts, the sound of Clarissa's voice cracking over the line. But it was real, and I'd done it. I'd pulled the plug on their whole trip, left them scrambling, and now I was here, 2 towns away, starting over on my terms. I got up, stretched, and ordered room service, coffee, toast, a couple of eggs sunny side up. While I waited, I checked my phone. The screen was lit up with notifications, missed calls, voicemails, a flood of texts that had poured in overnight. I scrolled through them slow, sipping water from a glass on the nightstand. Gregory, you think this is a game? You're done, kid. Marilyn, this is unacceptable. Fix it now. Nora, seriously, where's the car? This sucks. And Clarissa, over and over, starting with anger, then shifting to something else. You've embarrassed us all. Then please, just talk to me. And finally, I don't know what to do. I set the phone down, my jaw tight, and stared out at the water. Embarrass them? That was rich, coming from the woman who'd let me sit alone at dinner, who'd shrugged while her family iced me out. I didn't owe them a damn thing. Not an explanation, not a fix, nothing. The food came, and I ate slow, the eggs hot and the coffee strong, letting the bitterness wake me up. My phone buzzed again, Clarissa calling this time. But I let it ring, watching the screen until it went dark. I wasn't ready to hear her voice yet. I needed this day for me. I cleaned up, pulled on a clean shirt and shorts, and headed out. The new resort was alive. People lounging by the pool, the air thick with sunscreen and laughter. I grabbed a towel from the desk and found a chair near the water, kicking back with a cold soda from the bar. My phone stayed in my pocket, buzzing every now and then, but I ignored it. I watched the waves instead, the way they rolled in steady and sure, and felt my shoulders loosen for the first time in days. They were stranded back in Cape Haven. I knew that much. The rooms were gone, the car picked up by the rental place, the fancy dinners and tours wiped out. I pictured them dragging their bags to some cheap motel, Gregory's face red as he yelled at the staff, Marilyn snapping at anyone who'd listen, Nora sulking over her dead phone. Clarissa would be in the middle, trying to hold it together, probably texting me nonstop. I pulled my phone out, just to see. More messages. We're at a motel now. Thanks to you. From Clarissa. Then this is childish, you know that, right? I smirked, took a sip of my soda, and typed back a single line, enjoy the view. I didn't wait for a reply, just turned the phone off and tossed it into my bag. Let them stew. I spent the day by the pool, swimming a few laps, drying off in the sun, ordering a sandwich when I got hungry. It was simple, easy mine. No one telling me where to sit, no one leaving me out. The hours slipped by, the sun climbing high then dipping low, and I felt lighter with every minute. By evening, I was back in my suite, showered and sitting on the balcony with a glass of wine I'd grabbed from the lobby bar. The sky was orange and pink, the water dark below, and I let my mind wander. What were they doing right now? Fighting, probably. Gregory blaming Clarissa, Marilyn blaming me, Nora just complaining. I didn't care enough to wonder too long. My phone was still off, but I turned it on just to check, one last time before I let the night take over. The screen lit up with more texts, more voicemails. Clarissa's latest. You've made your point, okay? Can we talk? I listened to her voicemail next, her voice softer now, tired. We're at this awful place. No one's happy, and I just want to fix this. Call me. I deleted it, took a long sip of wine, and leaned back in my chair. Fix it. She didn't get it. There was no fixing this. Not the way she wanted. This wasn't about talking it out or going back to how things were. This was about me finally saying no. I grabbed my phone again, pulled up the camera, and snapped a picture, the wine glass in my hand, the ocean dark and endless beyond the railing. I sent it to her with one word. Cheers. Then I turned the phone off for good. Let them figure out the rest. I finished my wine, the night air cool against my skin, and watched the stars poke through the sky. They could rage all they wanted, Gregory with his temper, Marilyn with her whining, Clarissa with her guilt trips. I was done carrying it. This was the fallout, and I was letting it burn out on its own. Tomorrow, I'd figure out my next move, but tonight was mine, and it felt damn good. I woke up to the sound of seagulls calling outside my balcony, the morning light slipping through the blinds and painting stripes across the floor. My suite was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels full instead of empty, and I stayed in bed for a minute, just breathing it in. Yesterday had been mine. Poolside, good food, that glass of wine under the stars, and I could still feel the weight I'd shaken off. No more chasing Clarissa's family, no more swallowing their crap. I'd burned their trip to the ground, and I wasn't sorry. I got up, made coffee with the little machine in the room, and sat by the window, watching the ocean wake up with the day. My phone was still off, and I left it that way, not ready to dive back into their mess. I figured they were still at that motel, stewing in their own chaos, and that was fine by me. I finished my coffee, showered, and headed down to the resort's cafe for breakfast, pancakes again, because why not? The place was buzzing with people, families laughing, couples sharing plates, and I took a table by myself, content to watch the world go by. I was halfway through my stack, syrup dripping off my fork, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I turned it on just to check the time, and now there it was, lighting up with a name I didn't expect. Isaac, Clarissa's cousin. I hadn't seen him on this trip. He lived a few states away, but we'd always gotten along at family stuff before. I wiped my hands on a napkin, curious, and opened the text. Dude, it said, just so you know, you're not the first. I stared at it, my fork hovering over the plate, not sure what he meant. Another message came through before I could reply. They did this to Clarissa's ex too. Same crap, pushing him out, testing him, seeing if he'd break. She never told you. My stomach dropped, the pancakes turning heavy in my gut. I set the fork down, my hands resting on the table, and read it again. Her ex-fiancé, some guy named Paul she'd dated years before me, who I'd only heard about in passing. She'd said they split because he couldn't handle her family, and I'd never pushed for more. Now Isaac's words were sinking in, sharp and cold, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was missing. I texted back, keeping it short. What do you mean? He replied fast. It's their thing, man. Gregory and Marilyn. They've got this sick tradition. They freeze out the new guy, make him feel like dirt, see if he'll stick around. Clarissa knows. She's seen it before. I leaned back in my chair, my coffee going cold, and let that hit me. Clarissa knew. She'd watched her parents pull this on Paul, isolating him, ignoring him, treating him like he didn't belong. And she'd let them do it to me too. All those shrugs, all those it's just their way excuses, weren't just her brushing it off. She'd been part of it, letting it happen, maybe even waiting to see if I'd crack like he did. I sat there, staring out the window at the waves, my mind racing. Isaac texted again. Paul bailed after a year. Guess they thought you'd do the same. Sorry, man. Thought you knew. I didn't reply, just set the phone down and pushed my plate away. The cafe noise faded around me, kids laughing, dishes clinking, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat, loud and steady in my ears. She'd known. That was the truth that cut deepest. Not just that her family was awful, but that she'd stood by and let them test me, like I was some lab rat in their twisted game. I thought about the dinner, the breakfast, the sailing trip. Every time they'd left me out, she'd been there, saying nothing, doing nothing. I'd blamed Gregory's loud mouth, Marilyn's cold shoulder, Nora's smirks, but Clarissa was the one who'd let it happen. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with. I stood up, left cash on the table, and walked out, the sun hot on my face as I headed back to my room. I needed to think, to let this settle. Back in the suite, I sat on the balcony, the ocean air sharp and salty, and replayed it all. Isaac's words were the crack in the mirror. Everything I'd been holding together shattered, and I could see it clear now. This wasn't just a bad trip. This was a pattern, a sick little ritual they'd perfected, and Clarissa had signed off on it. I didn't know Paul, didn't know how he'd broken, but I wasn't him. I hadn't just walked away. I'd fought back, canceled their world out from under them. Maybe that's why they were panicking now, why Clarissa's texts had gone from mad to begging. They didn't expect me to push back. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through her messages again. We can fix this. I'm sorry. Just talk to me. And felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, hard clarity. She'd known, and she'd let me twist in it, waiting to see if I'd measure up. I didn't know her to talk, didn't know her anything. I tossed the phone onto the table, leaned back, and watched the waves roll in. This was the truth, ugly and raw, and it changed everything. They'd wanted to see if I'd break. Well, I hadn't. and now they'd have to deal with the pieces. I woke up the next morning with Isaac's text still burning in my head, the truth about Clarissa and her family sitting heavy on my chest like a rock I couldn't push off. The sun was up, streaming through the balcony door, and the ocean outside was calm, but inside me, it was anything but. I'd spent half the night staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of this trip, every shrug, every excuse she'd thrown my way. She'd known her parents were testing me, known they'd done it before, and she'd let me walk right into it. I wasn't just mad at her family anymore. I was mad at her, at us, at the whole damn thing I'd thought we had. I got up, made coffee, and stood by the window, the mug hot in my hands. My phone was quiet now, no new calls, no texts since last night's flood. They were probably licking their wounds at that motel, figuring out their next move. Good. Let them sweat. I wasn't hiding anymore, though. I was done running from this. I wanted them to see what they'd lost, to face what I'd done. So I texted Clarissa, "Meet me at the Coastal Inn, Conference Room B, 2 p.m. Bring your family." No explanation. No please, just that. She replied fast, "Okay, we'll be there." I set the phone down, finished my coffee, and got ready. I showered, pulled on a clean shirt and jeans, and drove over early, the rental car humming under me as I left my new resort behind. The Coastal Inn was halfway between Cape Haven and where I was now, a neutral spot, small and simple, with a row of meeting rooms off the lobby. I got there at 1:30, booked the room with cash, and waited. The space was plain, long table, a few chairs, a whiteboard on the wall, and I sat at the head, my bag in front of me, papers I'd printed that morning spread out like a battle plan. They walked in at 2:05, all four of them, looking rougher than I'd ever seen. Gregory's face was red, his shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Marilyn's hair was flat, her eyes puffy. Nora slouched in behind them, her phone clutched tight, probably still dead from no Wi-Fi. Clarissa came last, her jaw tight, her gaze flicking to me then away. They sat down across from me, the table a wall between us, and nobody said a word at first. I leaned back, hands folded, and let the silence stretch. "What's this about?" Gregory finally barked, his voice loud in the small room. I didn't flinch, just reached into my bag and pulled out the stack of cancellation receipts. I slid them across the table, one by one. "This," I said, tapping the first sheet, "is your resort suite canceled." I slid the next one over. "The car rental gone." Another. "Your yacht tour?" Gregory erased. I kept going. Dinner reservations, Maryland spa day. Every little piece of their trip I torched until the papers fanned out in front of them. Marilyn snatched one up, her lips thinning as she read it. "You did this?" she snapped, her voice sharp. "All of it." I nodded, slow and steady. "Every bit. My card, my name, my call." Gregory slammed a fist on the table, the receipts jumping. "You little," he started, but I cut him off, pulling out my phone. I played Clarissa's voicemails first, the ones from yesterday, her voice going from mad to pleading. "Where are you?" "Everything's gone." Then I played Isaac's, his calm tone spilling the truth. They did this to her ex too. "Clarissa knows." The room went dead quiet, the air thick with it. Clarissa's face went pale, her hands gripping the table edge. Nora stared at her, eyes wide. Marilyn turned to her daughter, mouth open, but nothing came out. Gregory just glared at me, his knuckles white. "You let this happen," I said, looking straight at Clarissa, my voice low but hard. "You watched them humiliate me, dinner, breakfast, sailing, all of it, and you said nothing. You knew they'd done it before, and you let them do it to me." She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes dropping to the table. "It's not," she started, but I shook my head. "Don't," I said. "Isaac told me everything. Your sick little tradition, seeing if I'd break." "I didn't break, Clarissa." I walked away. Gregory lunged forward, his chair scraping. "You're overreacting, you punk. This is nothing." I stood up, matching his height across the table. "Nothing?" I said, my voice rising for the first time. "You shoved me out, treated me like I didn't exist, and I pointed at Clarissa, let it happen. That's not nothing. That's a choice." Marilyn cut in, her tone icy. "You've made your point. What now?" I grabbed my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and looked at them, really looked at them. Gregory fuming, Marilyn rigid, Nora shrinking, Clarissa silent. "Now," I said, "you don't fix a home that was never built for you. You leave it behind." Clarissa's head snapped up, her eyes wet. "We can fix this," she said, her voice small. "Please." I shook my head again, stepping toward the door. "No," I told her. You don't get it. I'm not fixing anything. I'm done. I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me, their voices rising in a muffled mess I didn't stick around to hear. The parking lot was hot, the sun glaring off the asphalt, and I got in the car, my hands steady on the wheel. I didn't look back as I drove away, the coastal and shrinking in the rearview. They could keep their traditions, their tests, their broken little family. I'd given them the truth, laid it out raw, and now I was free of it. The road stretched ahead, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I drove away from the coastal and with the windows down, the wind rushing past me, carrying the salt of the ocean and the weight of what I'd just done. The confrontation was still fresh, Gregory's red face, Marilyn's icy glare, Nora's wide eyes, Clarissa's shaky voice, but it didn't cling to me like I thought it would. It was over, done, and I'd said what I needed to say. The road stretched out ahead, empty and open, and I felt lighter with every mile I put between me and them. I didn't know where I was going yet, just that I wasn't going back, not to Cape Haven, not to that life. I stopped at a gas station an hour later, filled up the tank, and grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler inside. The clerk barely looked at me, just rang me up and handed me my change, and I liked it that way, no questions, no explanations. I sat in the car for a minute, the engine idling, and checked my phone. A few texts from Clarissa, please, let's talk. I didn't mean for this, but I deleted them without replying. Gregory had sent one too, a string of insults I didn't bother reading. I turned the phone off, tossed it into the passenger seat, and pulled back onto the highway. The sun was dipping low now, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink, and I kept driving until I hit a small town I didn't know the name of. It had a diner, a motel, a few shops, nothing fancy, just quiet. I checked into the motel, a single room with a lumpy bed and a TV that probably didn't work, and dropped my bag by the door. It wasn't the luxury of the resort, but it was mine, and that was enough. I walked to the diner next door, ordered a burger and fries, and ate alone at a corner booth, the hum of the jukebox filling the space. The food was greasy, simple, perfect. I didn't need anything more. That night, I slept hard, the kind of sleep that comes when you've let go of something big. The next day, I drove back to the city, back to our house, hers now, I guess, and started the paperwork. I called a lawyer I knew from work, filed for separation, and got it rolling before she could even try to stop me. She called a few times over the next week, left voicemails I didn't listen to, sent texts I didn't answer. Marilyn tried too, her messages sharp and demanding, like she could guilt me into coming back. Even Gregory fired off a few, mostly threats and curses, but they didn't touch me. I was done letting them in. A week later, I got a text from Isaac. They're imploding. Clarissa moved out. Gregory won't speak to her. I stared at it, the words sinking in, and typed back. Good. That was it. No long reply. No questions. Just that. I didn't care about the details, didn't need to know how their little world was falling apart. It wasn't my problem anymore. Over the next few months, I kept moving, found a new place, a small apartment downtown with a view of the river, nothing fancy but mine. I sold the house, split the money with Clarissa through the lawyers, and signed the divorce papers 6 months later. She didn't fight it, didn't show up to contest anything, just let it happen. I heard from a mutual friend she'd moved to another state, started over somewhere new, but I didn't ask where. I didn't need to know. The day the divorce was final, I sat on my new balcony with a beer, the river glinting under the afternoon sun, and felt the last piece of that old life slip away. It wasn't just a marriage I'd walked away from, it was a whole messed up legacy, a family built on control and silence and cruelty, and I'd burned my way out of it. I thought about Cape Haven sometimes, the resort, that first night at the dinner table, but it didn't hurt anymore. It was just a story now, something that happened to a guy I used to be. I started small traditions of my own, Friday nights at a bar down the street, Sunday mornings with coffee and the paper, trips to the coast when I felt like it. No one told me where to sit. No one left me out. My phone buzzed less those days, just friends checking in, work stuff, normal things. Isaac texted once more, months later. You good? I wrote back. Yeah, better than ever. And I meant it. I'd taken their test, their twisted little game, and turned it on its head. They'd wanted to see if I'd break, but I didn't. I walked away, built something new, something that fit me. The river kept flowing outside my window, steady and sure, and I leaned back in my chair, the beer cold in my hand. This was peace, not the fake kind I'd chased with Clarissa's family, but the real stuff, hard won and quiet. I didn't just leave them behind. I left the version of me who'd put up with it. And now, every day was mine, on my terms, free by the fire I'd set myself.